Sasaki is frustrated because his work meeting lasted until midnight again. He feels like others are intentionally being loud and showy to annoy him. Sasaki walks away from work, noting that the constant meetings are taking a toll on everyone. He admits to himself that he relies on the smile of a supermarket clerk named Yamada for comfort. The local supermarket is open for 24-hour service. Sasaki pays for his items at the counter. He is disappointed to find that Yamada is not the one working tonight. Sasaki walks through an alleyway telling himself he needs to find a real hobby instead of relying on others. A woman's voice calls out his name from the shadows. Tayama leans out and tells Sasaki that it is nice to see him again. Sasaki stops in his tracks looking surprised and exhausted. Sasaki tells Tayama that he has a problem with her. She notes that the area is empty and invites him to have a smoke. Sasaki asks Tayama why she told Yamada that he was a fan of hers, explaining that it has been embarrassing to visit her counter ever since. Tayama laughs, suggesting it wasn't embarrassing enough to keep him away. Sasaki wants to know how she even knew about it. Sasaki reaches into his bag to look for something while Tayama watches. Tayama smokes a cigarette while Sasaki holds out a package of food. Sasaki offers a bag of yummy akaki to Tayama as thanks for letting him smoke there previously. Tayama is surprised that he likes that specific snack. Tayama takes the snack and jokes that Sasaki knows exactly how to cater to old ladies. Sasaki stumbles back at the comment. Sasaki worries that he is getting old because he has developed a taste for those types of crackers. Tayama thanks Sasaki and tells him to come in for a smoke rather than just standing there. Sasaki is surprised to see that she actually likes the snack he chose. Sasaki sits down and suggests that Tayama must be hungry after her late shift. He advises her not to eat too much or she will have trouble sleeping. Sasaki finds that he left his cigarettes at work, but tells Tayama it is no problem. She offers to give him some of hers despite his protests. Tayama reaches out and offers a cigarette to Sasaki. Sasaki addresses Tayama by name while looking flustered. Sasaki tells Tayama to speak up if she can't eat while smoking. She mockingly tells him how observant he is. Tayama puts out her cigarette and confirms that she finds it fun to play around with an old man like Sasaki. Tayama explains to Sasaki that teasing him is simply how she copes with things. Tayama compares her behavior to Sasaki, always seeking out Yamada, which catches him off guard. Sasaki agrees with her but asks if it is right to meddle with his only source of comfort. Tayama notes that they both use other people to cope with their problems. Tayama tells Sasaki not to be so upset and invites him to come back again another time. Sasaki stays behind and looks pensive after Tayama's departure. Sasaki decides that he will indeed come back. At the supermarket, Yamada points out that Sasaki buys a lot of the rice crackers and asks if they are any good. Yamada says that someone gave her the crackers recently and now she cannot stop eating them. Sasaki asks if she likes them too. Sasaki asks if someone gave her the crackers recently as he realizes that Tayama was the one who gave them to her. Sasaki is shocked by the possibility that Yamada and Tayama might actually be close friends. Sasaki continues to ponder their relationship while staring at Yamada. She sneezes and jokingly blames it on a dumb old man thinking about her somewhere. Sasaki's boss yells at him to report to his office because customers are filing complaints. The boss continues to berate Sasaki for his poor attitude and lack of responsiveness. Later, Sasaki sits dejectedly at his desk while a coworker asks if he is doing all right. Sasaki tries to push through his miserable workday by focusing on his plans to visit the supermarket and see Yamada's smile once he is finished. The boss gives Sasaki even more tasks for the next day, including apologizing to all their business partners. Sasaki feels like his goal of getting off work is slipping further away. The office building is dark late at night, and Sasaki feels completely dead inside from the exhaustion. A few days pass and Sasaki returns to the supermarket. Yamada cheerily hands Sasaki his change, but he is too gloomy to be cheered up and offers a weak thanks. Yamada tells Sasaki that he has accumulated enough points for a large discount on rice crackers the following day, which he acknowledges before leaving. As Sasaki walks away, a coworker informs Yamada that it is time for her shift to change. Yamada notes that her usual hospitality failed to cheer Sasaki up today and wonders why he seemed so down. Sasaki stares off into the distance and considers going for a smoke, recalling Tayama's face. Sasaki visits the smoking area but thinks Tayama is absent. She suddenly appears behind him and pokes his back, calling herself his convenient woman and scaring him. Sasaki asks Tayama if she just finished work and she confirms that she did. Tayama greets Sasaki warmly but quickly cuts the small talk to push him toward their smoking spot. Sasaki agrees and follows her lead. The two sit down together in the alleyway in a quiet moment while smoking. Tayama notices Sasaki letting out a heavy sigh and asks what is bothering him. He admits he is overwhelmed because his boss has been forcing him to work non-stop overtime lately, then worries that he is boring her with his complaints. Tayama tells Sasaki that Yamada is actually quite bothered by something. Sasaki immediately worries that he was rude to the cashier, but Tayama clarifies that it is something else. Tayama explains that Yamada is actually worried about him because he hasn't been looking very well lately. Sasaki is stunned into silence by the realization that Yamada has been concerned for his well-being. Sasaki reflects on how considerate Yamada is and thinks to himself that she is truly an amazing cashier. Sasaki thanks Tayama for the information. She claims she is only passing along the message, but Sasaki begins to point out her own behavior. Sasaki notes that Tayama always goes out of her way to tell him these things. He also mentions that her hair is down instead of being tied up as usual and asks if that means she rushed to see him. Tayama laughs and blows a cloud of smoke directly into his face. Sasaki shouts at Tayama and tells her to stop blowing smoke at him. Tayama suddenly stands up and leans in very close to Sasaki's face, catching him off guard. Tayama looks Sasaki in the eye and tells him that her hair is only down because she was too lazy to tie it up. Tayama pulls back and says she won't any more secrets because Sasaki has been too cheeky. She calls him a blockhead and he gets flustered and defensive about being called dumb. Sasaki is depressed at his desk. His co-workers whisper that he got really angry and made a new recruit cry today. Sasaki feels a heavy weight on his shoulders, wondering what went wrong. Sasaki remembers trying to encourage a new employee by telling her to try harder next time after a few mistakes. She shuddered and thought he was mad at her, resulting in his boss yelling at him. Sasaki sits at home clutching his head. He believes things wouldn't have gone poorly if he had a clear voice and gentle smile like Yamada the cashier from the second register. He decides he needs to learn from her. Sasaki meets Tayama at their smoking spot. She greets him. Tayama informs Sasaki that Yamada has already gone home for the night. Sasaki knows because she wasn't there during his shopping. He asks Tayama if she finds him scary. Tayama finds the question funny. Sasaki admits that he made a new hire cry at work today. Tayama finds the situation interesting and asks if Sasaki is the type who gets angry easily at work. Sasaki loudly denies it. Sasaki explains that the girl made a small mistake and he only wanted to cheer her up, but it backfired. He would feel terrible if he made her hate her job. Tayama listens while smoking. Tayama laughs and says it doesn't matter because he works for a bad company and will likely quit sooner or later. Sasaki is demoralized by her words. Tayama adds that if the girl stays long enough, she will eventually realize that Sasaki is a good person. Tayama says the girl will figure it out unless she quits first. Sasaki mentions he wants to learn to smile like Yamada and knows they practice smiling a lot at the store. He asks Tayama for help. Sasaki asks Tayama for a demonstration and thanks her. Tayama begins giving him instructions on how to raise his facial muscles, curve his eyes into a moon shape, and show his upper teeth. Tayama performs a perfect radiant smile exactly like Yamada's. Sasaki is stunned and stares at Tayama in disbelief, recognizing the familiar expression. Sasaki suddenly starts laughing and turns away. He repeatedly apologizes to a confused Tayama. Sasaki blushes and smiles while smoking, admitting that he is quite shocked by what just happened. Sasaki tells Tayama that the cute expression she just made looks really good on her. Hands reach out and squish Sasaki's cheeks. Tayama pinches Sasaki's face, explaining that a hands-on lesson will help him understand the mechanics of a smile better than just watching an example. Sasaki mumbles through his pinched cheeks, apologizing and asking Tayama if she is angry with him. Tayama abruptly ends the practice and walks away. Sasaki is left confused but agrees when she tells him to keep the lesson in mind. At the supermarket, Yamada hands over some change with her signature customer service smile. Sasaki walks away from the register feeling rejuvenated. Yamada continues to smile as he leaves. Yamada watches Sasaki's back as he walks away, wondering to herself about his behavior from before. Yamada touches her own cheek while thinking about the compliment Sasaki gave to Tayama. She tells herself not to laugh, noting that his claim of only ever watching her smile was a lie. The spring weather is clear and breezy. Sasaki walks through town feeling exhausted after being scolded by a client. He decides to stop by the usual store before heading back to the office. Sasaki peeks into the smoking area assuming Tayama won't be there during the day. He is stunned to find Yamada standing there instead. Sasaki stares in disbelief and lets out a loud shout of surprise. Yamada smiles warmly and greets Sasaki. He is caught completely off guard by her sudden appearance in the alleyway. Yamada tells a flustered Sasaki to calm down. He asks what she is doing in the smoking area and if she has started working daytime shifts. Yamada explains she is filling in for a vacancy today. She prepares to tell him why she came to this specific spot while he tries to settle his nerves. Yamada says she came for the vending machine since it is the only one around. Sasaki acknowledges her reason for being there. Yamada asks if he left work early. Sasaki says he is actually on his way back to the office but hoped to catch Tayama for a smoke. Sasaki panics and apologizes to Yamada for being in the employee area. He explains he was only taking advantage of Tayama's generosity and feels like an outsider. Yamada starts to say that it is not her own fault. Yamada giggles at Sasaki's frantic apology while he looks on in surprise. Yamada tells Sasaki it is fine because Tayama already told her about him. Sasaki realizes the two of them must be friends. Yamada confirms they are very good friends with much in common. Sasaki remains oblivious as she whispers about how slow he is to catch on. Sasaki thinks to himself that both Yamada and Tayama are very perceptive of others. Yamada stares at him with an intense, focused expression. Sasaki decides to leave without smoking so the smell does not cling to Yamada. He apologizes for interrupting her break and prepares to head back to work. Yamada calls out to Sasaki, causing him to turn back toward her in surprise. Yamada reaches up and picks something off Sasaki's face as he stands still in front of her. Yamada looks at Sasaki with a focused gaze. Yamada holds out the flower petal she just retrieved and asks Sasaki if it had been stuck to him the entire time. Sasaki looks on in a daze. Sasaki is mortified to realize he had a flower petal on his head. Yamada confirms that it was there during their entire conversation. Yamada playfully sticks out her tongue and apologizes, admitting she didn't say anything because she thought he looked cute with it. Sasaki accepts the apology and thanks her, feeling flustered. He begins to rethink his impression of Yamada. Sasaki realizes that Yamada actually has a mischievous side. Tayama smokes a cigarette alone and sighs, thinking about how incredibly dense Sasaki is. A coworker tells Yamada that her shift is finally over. Yamada is told that the manager needs to speak with her. She wonders if Sasaki is still stuck working overtime or if he will stop by the smoking area tonight. Sasaki lets out a violent sneeze while walking outside. Sasaki finishes his shopping and complains about how cold it is for a spring night. He decides to have one cigarette before going home and greets Tayama as he enters the alleyway. Tayama sits hunched over and fuming with anger. Sasaki notices her terrible mood and starts to sweat. Tayama glares at Sasaki while he nervously greets her with a forced smile. Tayama asks if Sasaki has the day off. He says it's rare for him, and Tayama notes it makes sense for a black company like his. Sasaki comments that getting a day off is nice while Tayama continues to smoke in silence. Tayama asks Sasaki if he is going to smoke. He replies that it's chilly and he wants to get a drink, first offering to get her one as well. Sasaki stands by the vending machine and remarks that smoking is tempting when feeling unwell, but a warm drink is also a good choice. Sasaki mentions that he received a complaint a long time ago. Sasaki recounts being told he shouldn't reek of smoke while serving customers. He adds that his manager defended him since asking him to quit would be unreasonable. Tayama admits that receiving that kind of criticism makes her feel stupid. Sasaki asks if she is lonely and explains that people lose trust when they see a new side of someone they admired, even if the person hasn't actually changed. Sasaki apologizes for prying and admits he doesn't even know her job. He suddenly breaks into a fit of loud sneezing. Tayama stands up and removes her jacket as Sasaki continues to sneeze. She notes that he is dressed too lightly for the cold weather. Tayama drapes her jacket over Sasaki's shoulders despite his protests. She tells him that she is lending it to him to help him stay warm. Sasaki feels warmed up and thanks Tayama while she looks at him with a serious expression. Tayama reaches out and pulls on the sleeve of the jacket she lent to Sasaki. Sasaki stands in front of the vending machine wondering what to buy. Tayama tells him that choosing the drinks is usually her line. Tayama informs Sasaki that she can't drink coffee and usually prefers juice or Lipovitan. Sasaki is shocked by the news, and Tayama notes that she didn't realize he could make such a face. A shopping basket containing rice crackers, a drink disinfectant, and air freshener is placed on the counter. Yamada questions Sasaki about the air freshener in his basket. Sasaki stands at the register looking completely miserable and begins to stammer an explanation. Yamada scans the items while Sasaki continues to struggle with his words. Sasaki gives up and tells Yamada to never mind as he slumps over in dejection. Yamada stares at Sasaki as he walks away from the register, noting to herself that his reason for buying the items is probably not something she should hear while working. Night falls over the supermarket. Tayama tells Sasaki that he must have been told by someone that he smells like tobacco. The two sit together in their usual spot while smoking. Sasaki asks Tayama if she is in a spur. She laughs and tells him that everyone probably seems like a psychic from his perspective, then explains she simply saw him buy the air freshener at the store. Sasaki admits that Tayama was right and explains that his non-smoker boss hounded him about his smell, demanding he do something about it. Tayama thinks to herself that she hit the bullseye. Sasaki laughs and notes that dealing with such complaints is just part of being a smoker. Tayama advises Sasaki that brushing his teeth after smoking significantly reduces the smell. Tayama continues her advice, suggesting he spray his clothes as well. She notes that while it helps, complaints will still happen occasionally. Sasaki looks surprised by her thorough knowledge. Sasaki expresses his admiration for Tayama's expertise on the subject. She downplays it, saying she learned these tricks from her seniors at work while imagining Sasaki as a loyal dog. Sasaki looks at Tayama with gratitude and tells her that regardless of where she learned it, she is the one teaching him now. Tayama stares back at him. Tayama asks Sasaki for his hand, causing him to panic slightly as he wonders what she plans to do. Tayama hands Sasaki a small bottle of air freshener that she uses herself. He worries that it looks too expensive, but she insists it is fine since it is already used, and she has more at home. Sasaki thanks her and admires the stylish bottle, wondering what the scent is like. Tayama asks if he wants to find out. Tayama slides her jacket down her shoulder and tells Sasaki she applied the spray there, inviting him to lean in and smell it. Sasaki stares blankly, processing the provocative suggestion. Sasaki shouts that he won't do it and asks Tayama if she views him as a dog. She sighs, admitting she thought he would just go with the flow and smell her. Tayama decides that if Sasaki were a dog, he would specifically be a Labrador Retriever. Sasaki is annoyed that his suspicion was correct. The next day arrives at the supermarket. Yamada gives Sasaki his change with a bright professional smile at the register. Yamada notes that Sasaki smells like Tayama today after he thanks her for his change. The observation sends him into a state of sudden shock. Sasaki becomes extremely flustered and tries to explain that he received the deodorant yesterday but forgot to ask for instructions. He admits he likely used too much, while Yamada laughs at his embarrassment. Sasaki hurries away from the store in a state of mental disarray. Yamada's coworker tells her to take a break and asks if something is wrong. Yamada stares off into space, looking deeply troubled. Yamada covers her face in shame, thinking that, while she only meant to tease him, she has never felt so embarrassed before in her life. Sasaki walks along, satisfied that the deodorant Tayama suggested is working well with his boss. He thinks of her as an etiquette master and offers her his thanks in his head. Sasaki carries a small gift, hoping that Tayama will appreciate the gesture of thanks. Sasaki approaches the smoking area and notices a figure sitting inside with their back turned. Sasaki calls out a greeting to Tayama as he enters. A woman with long black hair and glasses named Goth turns around and stares at him coldly. Sasaki is terrified to find another employee there instead of Tayama. She demands to know who he is, and he awkwardly tries to introduce himself. The employee pulls out her phone to call for the police. Sasaki breaks into a desperate panic, shouting for her to stop and explaining that he is an acquaintance of Tayama. Sasaki panics and explains that he was just wandering around looking for a smoking area when Tayama called out to him. He admits he has been coming there and bothering her ever since. Goth snickers at Sasaki's frantic explanation while he continues to look distressed. Goth looks confused and wonders who this Tayama person is supposed to be. Goth realizes Sasaki is the regular who is always smiling at Yamada's counter. She notes to herself that he looks like her parents' dog Bess and remains confused about the name Tayama. Goth asks if the person he is looking for is actually Yamada. Sasaki reacts with shock, asking why she would suddenly bring up Yamada's name. Sasaki describes Tayama as a shrewd girl who wears a cool jacket. Gadu realizes that Tayama has completely duped him, recalling how the girl laughed about the situation earlier. Gadu asks if he came tonight to ask Tayama to smoke with him. Sasaki stammers that he just has a little something to give her. Gadu asks if the item is a tribute. Sasaki loudly insists that it is just a gift. Sasaki asks Gadu to give the gift to Tayama, assuming she will know who it is from. He quickly leaves while apologizing for disturbing her break. Yamada enters the back area and calls for the manager. Gadu watches her, reaffirming her thought that Sasaki really does look like a dog. Gadu tells Yamada she has to scold her for smoking with a customer. Yamada asks why and denies it while blowing a puff of smoke. Gadu says lying is useless because she heard the truth from Sasaki himself. Yamada is surprised to hear he was just there. Gadu holds out the bag and tells Yamada that the gift is for Tayama-san. Gadu hands the gift over and explains that Sasaki said it was for her. Yamada looks down at the gift, contemplating the sloppy confusion between her real name and the Tayama identity. Gadu tells Yamada that Sasaki is probably the only person who would fall for her tricks. She warns her to stop messing with such a kind-hearted man and asks if she is even listening. Yamada looks down at the gift, Sasaki left, noting that she already told him it was fine. Gadu watches her reaction with interest. Gadu stares at Yamada as her romance intuition spikes and her professional ethics reach a breaking point. Gadu decides to let the situation play out for now, since it provides some new entertainment for her boring night shifts. Later, Yamada asks to see the next part of a story, but manager Gadu tells her to buy and read her own romance novels instead of mooching off her Kindle. Sasaki returns to the area behind the supermarket. Sasaki peeks around the corner with a worried expression, trying to be as quiet as possible. Sasaki feels guilty for causing trouble and imagines the other employee scolding Tayama for bringing an old man to the staff area. He wonders why he is like this. Tayama sneaks up behind Sasaki and shouts about stranger danger, causing him to scream for forgiveness in a panic. Tayama asks why he was sneaking around. Sasaki whispers about his encounter with the other employee last time and asks if she said anything to Tayama. Tayama clarifies that the woman he met was the manager. She says the manager didn't make a big deal out of it, which leaves Sasaki shocked. Tayama pulls on Sasaki's jacket and tells him that the manager is fine with him smoking there as long as he does it in moderation. Sasaki is surprised by the news. Tayama leads the way as Sasaki follows behind, still sweating and wondering if she is really sure about the manager's permission. Tayama comments that the portable ashtray is quite cute. Sasaki says that since she refused money, he wanted to show his appreciation with a gift, and he is happy she likes it. Tayama nods in agreement. Tayama explains that she cannot stop smiling whenever she looks at the ashtray. Sasaki listens happily, thinking she is genuinely touched. Tayama bursts out laughing, explaining that she is only smiling because she can easily picture an old man like him carefully picking out such a cute item at the store. Sasaki is taken aback by her sudden teasing. Sasaki asks Tayama if she is just messing with an older man like him. Tayama plays dumb and tells him to lighten up, leaving him unsure whether she is joking or being sincere. Tayama holds up the ashtray and gives him a soft, genuine smile. Tayama quietly thanks Sasaki for the gift, causing him to look at her in surprise. Tayama promises to take good care of the ashtray as she looks at him with a gentle gaze. Sasaki decides that whether she is teasing him or not, he is happy with her reaction. He speaks up to change the subject. Tayama suggests Sasaki dump his cigarette ashes and offers to let him use her new portable ashtray right away. Sasaki is pleased and begins to thank her. Tayama suddenly leans in very close, pressing her side against him to hold out the ashtray. Sasaki freezes in surprise at her sudden proximity. Sasaki nervously stammers and asks if she is sitting too close to him. Tayama tells him that he might get burned if he does not dump the ashes properly, urging him to go ahead and use it. Sasaki asks Tayama to just hand the ashtray over to him, but she playfully pulls her hand back, telling him to reach out and grab it himself. Sasaki closes his eyes and calls out her name in a flustered panic as she continues her game. Sasaki yells in frustration, demanding to know why she is holding the ashtray even further away. Tayama casually apologizes while laughing, presenting the out-of-reach ashtray like a magic trick. Tayama comments on how long Sasaki's arm is as he tries to reach the ashtray. Sasaki begs her to stop, complaining that his arm is already getting tired when he suddenly lets out a cry of pain. Tayama looks confused by his sudden reaction. Yamada scans a basket containing cold compressed patches and drinks at her register. She looks at the items with a feeling of dread, hoping it is not what she thinks. Sasaki stands in front of the counter groaning and rubbing his lower back, which is still in pain from the cramp he got the previous night. Yamada suddenly jumps back in a startle, asking if he is okay. She quickly tries to laugh it off, frantically explaining that she was just surprised and choked for a moment. Yamada repeatedly apologizes and begs Sasaki to spare her, looking deeply embarrassed. Sasaki is completely bewildered and tells her that there is absolutely no need to apologize that much. Yamada giggles to herself as she realizes that Sasaki's lingering pain is just a normal symptom of a middle-aged cramp. At Genki Trading, Sasaki repeatedly clicks his flip phone, frustrated because it will not turn on. His coworker asks him what is wrong. Sasaki considers getting the flip phone repaired, but his coworker calls him silly for wanting to fix an old flip phone when he could just buy a new one or switch to a smartphone. Sasaki ponders the suggestion, looking unsure about making the switch. Sasaki ends up purchasing a smartphone, holding it up as it shows 10 o'clock at night. Meanwhile, a cashier works diligently in the background. Sasaki rides the train home holding his new smartphone and feeling completely lost. He complains to himself that he cannot type correctly, worries about catching viruses from browsing the internet, and laments that he only wanted a simple way to read the news. Tayama sits at their usual smoking spot, smoking a cigarette, as she asks Sasaki if he wants her to teach him how to use his new smartphone. She adds that she had no idea he was still using a flip phone before this. Sasaki claps his hands together and begs Tayama to help him, calling her his teacher. Tayama giggles and remarks that using an outdated flip phone is very typical of him, which leaves him slightly puzzled. Tayama happily agrees to teach him. Sasaki thanks her enthusiastically and admits that he does not even know the basic controls, putting on his glasses to get ready. Tayama suddenly stops and stares directly at him in silence, catching Sasaki off guard. Sasaki asks if something is wrong. Tayama stands up and tells him she will teach him the most commonly used controls. Tayama demonstrates how to scroll back to the home screen and explains how the keyboard layout compares to his old flip phone, adding that he can download a news application. Sasaki is impressed and tells Tayama she is amazing, noting that it feels similar to using a flip phone. Tayama says that getting used to the rest of the features is up to him. Sasaki apologizes and asks if he can ask one more question. He wants to know how to make the letters on his phone screen larger. Tayama gives him a condescending look of amusement, making Sasaki panic. Tayama wonders how he even knows about font sizes if he is so clueless, and Sasaki explains that older phones have that option too. He nervously asks if she will help him while she ponders. Sasaki asks if adjusting the font size is too difficult while Tayama stands next to him in silence. Tayama turns back and tells him that she is willing to help him with it. Tayama suddenly reaches out and pushes Sasaki's glasses back up his nose, causing him to blush in surprise. Tayama tells Sasaki that he should keep his glasses on. Tayama asks for the phone so she can change the settings. Sasaki hands it over, admitting his eyesight is getting worse, and Tayama suddenly has an idea. Tayama offers to save Yamada's phone number as a celebration of his new smartphone. Sasaki frantically waves his hands and yells that it is absolutely not necessary. Sasaki tells Tayama that sharing Yamada's personal details is wrong. While he is talking, Tayama casually inputs the number and tells him she already saved it, leaving him frozen in shock. Sasaki looks devastated, asking Tayama how she could do something like that. Tayama looks back at him with a smug expression. Tayama casually reveals she was lying about having Yamada's number, causing Sasaki to fall backward in relief and shock. She finishes adjusting his phone settings and hands it back. Sasaki yells Tayama's name in frustration, but quickly notices that the words on his phone are now much easier to read. He weakly thanks her before suddenly getting on guard again as she calls him easily scared. Sometime later, the scene shifts back to the supermarket. Yamada holds her smartphone with a soft smile, giggling quietly. In the locker room, Yamada stretches her arms and enthusiastically tells herself to do her best at work today as well. In a flashback, Sasaki nervously approaches a store cashier to ask where he can find a portable ashtray designed for women, looking deeply embarrassed. Sasaki struggles to choose between two similar ashtrays in a floor full of women wanting to pick one quickly. He finally chooses one and asks the clerk to package it with a blue ribbon. At home, Tayama lies comfortably on her bed, hugging the cute portable ashtray Sasaki gifted her with a soft smile. Back in the alleyway, Tayama asks if she can try on Sasaki's glasses. Sasaki warns her that his prescription is very strong, but she tells him not to worry. Tayama puts on the glasses but immediately becomes extremely dizzy, asking how he can see through them. Sasaki replies that they are perfect for him and very useful even if he does not wear them all the time. The scene returns to the supermarket where someone asks about getting off work early. Yamada eats her lunch and complains that manager Goth should have told her she was getting off early before her break. Goth sips her drink and explains that the store is quiet today, adding that Yamada has the most flexible shifts. Goth asks Yamada to check the expiration dates on the frozen foods as well. Yamada simply slurps her noodles and says she is leaving. Yamada now in her casual clothes size as she places alcoholic drinks into her shopping basket. Tayama walks through the supermarket aisles, wishing she could have planned her meals better, deciding to just buy some beer smoke behind the store and go back to sleep. She suddenly spots Sasaki and prepares to tell him that Yamada is not working today. Tayama peeks around the corner and watches Sasaki closely. Tayama notes that Sasaki is indeed there, watching him pick out a bag of rice crackers. Tayama assumes Sasaki will just head home and briefly considers sneaking up behind him for a jump scare. She dismisses the idea as too boring and quickly comes up with a different plan. She approaches Sasaki and softly calls out his name. Smiling radiantly in her casual clothes, she cheerily wishes Sasaki a good evening. Sasaki is completely stunned and dazed by her sudden appearance in normal clothes. She calls out to him about his basket. Sasaki is so startled that he drops his basket, spilling his items onto the floor while frantically apologizing and greeting her back. Yamada asks if he is okay, feeling completely satisfied by his reaction. Sasaki nervously insists he is fine and claims his hands simply slipped. Internally, he is completely overwhelmed by seeing Yamada in her casual clothes and desperately tries to act natural as she calls his name again. Yamada smiles warmly and hands him one of his dropped items. Sasaki feels completely rejuvenated by her gentle presence and politely thanks her. Yamada asks Sasaki if he has finished picking out snacks, and he replies that he just wanted a small bite to go with his drinks. She decides to buy some snacks too and ponders what to get, prompting Sasaki to call out to her. Sasaki holds out his pack of cigarettes and notes that there are exactly 3 left inside. He asks Yamada if she can choose 3 different snacks to pair with them, and she happily agrees. Yamada announces that she has finally made her choice and Sasaki thanks her. Sasaki taps one of the cigarettes in his pack, declaring that it represents the snack Yamada is buying. Yamada quickly apologizes, telling him she was only joking. Sasaki apologizes for making decisions for her and mutters to himself to mind his own business. Yamada laughs it off and decides to go with his choice anyway. Yamada asks Sasaki if he does this kind of snack pairing often. Sasaki sheepishly explains that this is his personal method of fortune telling, where 1 cigarette means he gets off work early and 2 means he gets a break during the week. Sasaki starts to explain what 3 cigarettes mean, but cuts himself off in embarrassment, quickly apologizing and changing the subject to congratulate her on choosing her snack. As Sasaki walks away from the store, he recalls the final part of his fortune-telling rule, which dictates that 3 cigarettes mean the cashier that day will be Yamada. Tayama smokes in the alleyway and smiles, knowing exactly what Sasaki wanted to say before he chickened out. She taps her cigarette pack, thinking to herself that 3 taps mean he has noticed her, while 2 mean he still has not. Tayama stares down quietly, wondering what a single tap on the cigarette pack would mean. Tayama's thoughts are interrupted when a hand suddenly thrusts a pack of cigarettes right in front of her. Sasaki runs frantically through the dark streets, carrying his shopping, while Tayama predicts that he is going to be in major trouble. Sasaki panics in absolute terror, realizing that he was so distracted by Yamada's casual outfit that he accidentally walked out of the store with a magazine still tucked under his arm. Back at the supermarket, manager Goth sits cross-legged and scolds Sasaki for shoplifting. Sasaki desperately bows and apologizes, insisting it was an accident, but Goth tells him that every shoplifter says the exact same thing. A hand sprays water from a hose, splashing someone. Manager Goth sprays Sasaki with a hose, leaving him completely drenched. He awkwardly greets her as he drips with water. Goth apologizes and explains that she got carried away playing with the hose after cleaning up a milk spill from a delivery driver. Sasaki laughs nervously and comments that she really likes to play around. Sasaki hangs his wetsuit and clothes up on hangers to dry. The two sit side by side on crates, smoking in silence while Sasaki drapes a towel over his shoulders. Sasaki admits he is inexplicably nervous and apologizes for borrowing her towel and pants. Garu tells him not to worry since it was her fault for soaking him in the first place. Garu tells Sasaki that he does not need to be so formal with her since they are from the same generation. This revelation causes Sasaki to suddenly choke on his cigarette smoke in surprise. Garu notes that he looks like he is in his 40s and reveals that she is also 40 years old, advising him to relax. Sasaki reacts with shock to learn they are the same age. Sasaki expresses his immense respect for her, admitting he cannot believe someone his age runs such a busy supermarket next to the station. Garu notices that this has only made him even more polite and reserved than before. Garu points out that Sasaki gets very flustered over age and asks how he reacted when Tayama told him how old she was. Sasaki reveals that he never actually asked Tayama for her age. Garu leans in with a shocked expression, questioning how they could have been smoking together for so long without him ever asking for her age. Sasaki sheepishly confirms that he indeed never asked. Garu asks if he has ever asked Tayama anything about herself at all, and she is stunned when he says no. She demands to know if he simply lacks curiosity about other people, which Sasaki weakly denies. Sasaki explains that since Tayama always listens to his troubles, despite her teasing, he is naturally curious about her. He admits that he thinks about those things on his way home, but is ultimately content with just sitting and listening to her speak. Garu looks at Sasaki and quietly realizes why Tayama has become so deeply attached to him. She softly tells him that she understands. Garu bluntly asks if his explanation is just a roundabout way of saying that he likes Tayama the most. Sasaki turns completely red and loudly accuses her of going way too far. Garu asks Sasaki if he hates Tayama, which he immediately and loudly denies. Garu then presses him to tell her which of the two options it actually is. Just as Sasaki loudly confesses that of course he likes Tayama, Tayama slides the back door open to announce she has returned from her shopping trip. Both she and Garu react to his sudden declaration. Garu quickly stands up to leave, explaining that she has to address a customer complaint. She tells Sasaki to have fun talking with Tayama, leaving him flustered and confused. Tayama notices how wet Sasaki is, and he nervously explains there was a small accident. He asks if she heard what they were just talking about, but she simply asks what they said, making him freeze up with worry. Sasaki frantically insists that they were just having an unimportant chat, but Tayama cuts him off by pulling his towel over his head to dry his hair, telling him to make sure he dries it properly. Tayama leans in incredibly close to Sasaki's face under the towel to whisper directly to him. Tayama whispers her age 24 directly in his ear. Sasaki is left completely stunned and speechless by her sudden confession. Tayama gives him a teasing smile and Sasaki stammers as he asks her what that number is supposed to mean. Tayama playfully repeats his exact words from earlier, asking if he will think about that number on his way home. In a flashback, Garu and Tayama pass each other in the back hallway to swap shifts for the day. Garu thinks to herself that she has been curious for a long time about how Yamada changes the length of her hair so easily. Garu asks Yamada to her hair folding method. Yamada tells her it is not that hard, while secretly deciding to keep it a secret, giggling as Garu demands to know what she is muttering. Garu suggests that since they are the same age, Sasaki can call her Garu-chan. Sasaki panics and yells that they are moving too fast in every possible way. Garu asks if he is the type of person who uses nicknames, which he loudly denies. Nearby, Tayama watches them with a flat expression, wondering what the two older people are talking about. Back at Genki trading, a coworker calls out to Sasaki. Sasaki's coworker mentions hearing that a person's personality can be determined by the brand of cigarette they smoke, prompting Sasaki to ask what he means. His coworker explains that younger people enjoy discussing these topics at drinking parties and tells Sasaki to look it up himself. Sasaki ponders if it really is a popular conversation topic among the youth. Back in the alleyway, Tayama smokes and confirms that she has also heard of that theory before. Sasaki is surprised she knows about it, explaining he only recently learned of the concept from a coworker. He admits he finds it somewhat interesting and pulls out his smartphone to look it up. Tayama agrees to look it up together and asks what the search says about his specific brand of cigarettes, guiding him on how to use a quick search to find the result faster. The phone screen bluntly states that smokers of his brand like looking down on others, despite being masochists. Sasaki freezes in shock while Tayama suddenly chokes on her smoke in surprise. Sasaki looks completely horrified by the bizarre result, while Tayama continues to cough and mockingly comments on him smoking right at that moment. Sasaki nervously asks what it says about her brand of cigarettes, and Tayama giggles as she reads out a result claiming she is a horny person with a split personality. Tayama notes that these kinds of online tests always end up with dirty jokes and are written with extreme bias. Sasaki watches Tayama silently and thinks to himself that the part about having a double personality actually has some truth to it. Sasaki suddenly drops to his knees on his crate and deeply apologizes to Tayama. She is completely baffled by his sudden seriousness and asks what is wrong, pointing out that he has even taken off his glasses. Sasaki continues to bow and apologize, explaining that he had no idea the search results would return such crude jokes and is sorry for ruining their conversation. Tayama quietly watches his dramatic apology. Tayama calmly notes that it is true she is not fond of dirty jokes. Her cold comment physically stabs Sasaki with guilt as he slumps over. Tayama points out that Sasaki probably brought up the personality test because he thought it was something younger people enjoyed. Sasaki looks down in silent embarrassment. Tayama asks Sasaki if he was simply trying to make her happy, only to end up immediately apologizing afterward. Tayama giggles softly and calls Sasaki a dummy. Tayama reassures Sasaki that she is not angry at all and invites him to have another cigarette with her. As Sasaki looks at Tayama, his heart beats rapidly. He quietly reflects that she truly does seem to have a double personality, a theory he always suspected, but now believes is completely true. Sasaki cheerfully tells Tayama that she is cool and gentle, declaring that this is her true personality. The sudden compliment leaves Tayama completely speechless and blushing with embarrassment. Tayama suddenly grabs Sasaki by his tie and drags him close. Tayama pulls Sasaki's face extremely close to hers, pressing her lit cigarette against his to the flame. Sasaki stammers her name in a panic. Tayama holds up another cigarette for him and then sparks a lighter with a dark, menacing smile, asking if she should light it up for him. Sasaki nervously asks if she is mad at him, but Tayama insists she is not angry and points out her smile. He frantically apologizes again, causing her to ask why he is saying sorry. Sometime later, the scene returns to the supermarket. Sasaki walks along looking completely dejected and traumatized, reflecting on how Tayama ended up terrifying him the day before. Sasaki watches Yamada smile warmly at a customer, thinking to himself that it is definitely not okay for a scary girl like Tayama to be working alongside someone as sweet as Yamada. Sasaki turns to leave, but another cashier suddenly calls out to him, startling him. Yamada calls out to Sasaki, letting him know that her register is open and inviting him over. Sasaki looks shocked but eagerly complies. Garu watches quietly from a distance as Yamada scans Sasaki's items at the register. Garu thinks to herself that something fun must have happened and wishes she could find out what it is. Sasaki wipes his sweaty forehead with a handkerchief, letting out a sigh of relief. Sasaki complains to himself about the sweltering evening heat and how awful it has been to work outdoors this year. A little boy runs past happily eating an ice pop, prompting Sasaki to consider buying a popsicle on his own way home. Sasaki enters the supermarket, noting how busy it gets during the evening when he suddenly spots someone who catches his attention. Sasaki is shocked to find Yamada working the evening shift, happily thinking that today is a wonderful day as he sees her smiling warmly at her register. Yamada turns her head slightly, causing Sasaki to jolt in sudden shock as he notices something different about her. Yamada politely asks a customer for their point card. Sasaki is completely transfixed by her short-sleeved summer uniform, finding her appearance incredibly refreshing and cute. Sasaki thinks about how cute Yamada is before slapping himself to snap out of his daze. He turns to leave, deciding he no longer needs a popsicle since her refreshing smile has already cured his heat exhaustion. After Sasaki departs, Garu approaches Yamada at her register to ask her a question. In the alleyway, Tayama leans in close and demands to know why Sasaki did not buy anything the previous day, even though Yamada was working. The two sit in silence on their crates, smoking their cigarettes. Garu slides the back door open to apologize for interrupting them. Sasaki is shocked and asks when she saw him, while Tayama notes that a middle-aged man standing foolishly at the door is impossible to miss. Tayama asks Sasaki why he did not buy anything the previous day. He nervously explains that since it was so hot, he had only intended to buy a popsicle. Sasaki adds that he ended up feeling completely cooled down after experiencing an incredibly refreshing sight at the store. Tayama asks him what on earth he is talking about. Tayama flatly remarks that it must not have been Yamada's short sleeves that gave him that refreshing feeling. Sasaki screams in embarrassment as she immediately exposes his thoughts. Tayama smugly concludes that she was right while Sasaki frantically waves his hands and loudly denies it. Sasaki passionately claims that he only wanted to appreciate retail workers including Yamada for bringing a refreshing seasonal change by wearing short sleeves early. Tayama flatly asks if that means he does not think Yamada is cute. Sasaki completely breaks down in embarrassment, stuttering and covering his face in defeat as he realizes he cannot win the argument. Sasaki weakly admits that he simply thinks short sleeves suit Yamada very well. Tayama giggles at how much he is sweating in the heat, prompting him to ask if she isn't hot wearing her heavy jacket. She replies that she is barely wearing anything underneath. Tayama unzips and pulls back her jacket to show him, revealing that she is only wearing a tight crop top that exposes her stomach underneath. Sasaki is completely stunned and wide-eyed at the sudden revealing sight. Sasaki nervously stands up and prepares to leave while Tayama looks at him with a completely flat, unimpressed expression. Sasaki points to his own stomach and asks if her midriff is going to catch a cold in the night breeze. Tayama is completely dumbfounded by his unexpected grandfatherly concern. Sasaki continues to ask if she will get cold while Tayama stares back at him with an utterly flat, deadpan expression. Sasaki covers his face, lamenting how much more comforting Yamada's short sleeves are. Tayama sulks and glares at him, thinking to herself about how incredibly dense and hopeless this middle-aged man is. Sasaki takes off his suit jacket and hands it over, warning her that the night breezes can get chilly. He quickly turns away in embarrassment, stammering that she does not have to accept it if she doesn't want to. Tayama is surprised but quietly slips the oversized jacket on. Seeing her wear it, Sasaki panics and stammers that he only meant for her to use it to cover her lap, worrying if she is angry, but she simply stands up in silence. Tayama walks away and tells Sasaki to shut up, calling him an arm guy. Sasaki is left completely bewildered by the strange nickname. Tayama sticks her tongue out teasingly at him. Sasaki is left entirely confused, wondering what that nickname is even supposed to mean. Tayama reflects to herself on how incredibly dense Sasaki is about these kinds of things. Back at work, a coworker invites a groaning Sasaki out for a smoke. Sasaki sulks and blames his coworker for his recent troubles. His coworker asks if he actually discussed cigarette brands with a younger person, and Sasaki admits that he did. Sasaki complains that the girl hates him now and even yanked his tie. The coworker reacts in shock and jealousy, assuming they had a very intimate and fun time together. At home, Tayama sits on her bed wearing her crop top and thinks about Sasaki's reaction, misinterpreting his concern about her catching a cold as him preferring arms over tummies. Tayama pinches her upper arm and decides that she should start eating less ramen. In the pouring rain, a completely worn-out Sasaki walks home under his umbrella, relieved that his 14-day stretch of non-stop work is finally over. Sasaki recalls how his boss' sudden business trip and a coworker's absence forced the entire office into absolute chaos and misery. Sasaki continues walking with a dead, tired look on his face in the pouring rain. Sasaki walks through the rain, lamenting how sad rainy days are, when Tayama's voice suddenly calls out to him. Tayama greets Sasaki and notes that he looks exhausted, then asks him for some help. Sasaki happily agrees to help her out. A shopping basket is shown filled with paper rain dolls. Sasaki holds up one of the dolls with nostalgia, while Tayama explains that manager Goth always puts them up during the rainy season and lets the customers' kids draw faces on them for fun. Tayama mentions that the manager forced her to draw one too, revealing her creation, which features a poorly drawn dog face. Sasaki tries to stifle his laughter, but Tayama flatly admits she knows it looks terrible while he weakly tries to deny it. Tayama grabs him and shakes him, demanding he look the doll in the eye before saying anything. Sasaki frantically yells back that the drawing is just very stylized. Sasaki thinks his explanation is enough, but Tayama hands him a marker and tells him he should draw one as well. Tayama asks if he is bad at drawing, and Sasaki replies that he only doodles when he is sleepy. Tayama watches closely as he begins to sketch a face on one of the dolls. Sasaki draws a hilariously accurate, serious face of manager Goth on his doll. Tayama bursts out laughing, pointing out how much it looks like the manager and asking why he chose to draw her. Tayama wipes away her tears of laughter, commenting that it was incredibly fun. Sasaki smiles gently and says that since he drew the manager, he has another idea. Sasaki hands over another doll, revealing a cute, simple drawing of Tayama. She looks at it and remarks that it is actually quite cute and easy to draw, while Sasaki smiles warmly. Tayama teasingly asks if he has been paying close attention to her to draw her so well. She then takes the marker and offers to draw Sasaki, making him blush. Tayama happily hums as she begins drawing on a new doll. Sasaki smiles softly while watching her, quietly reflecting on how nice the moment feels. Tayama holds up her drawing on the doll and asks if he means this one, while Sasaki points out that it represents his cigarette. Sasaki reflects to himself that he actually quite likes rainy days because cigarette smoke disperses quickly and tastes richer, though he has been too busy to notice lately. Overcome by exhaustion, Sasaki begins to nod off mid-sentence while smoking. Sasaki completely falls asleep and leans his head onto Tayama's shoulder, and she softly answers him. Tayama gently holds Sasaki's chin as he sleeps on her shoulder, softly whispering that he has worked hard. Morning arrives with birds chirping and an alarm clock begins to beep loudly. Sasaki wakes up in his bed groaning as his alarm goes off. He checks his phone and is mortified that he fell asleep in front of Tayama, deciding he needs to rest, when he suddenly notices something on his hand. Sasaki is shocked to find a doodle of a spiral, a star doll face, a score of 100, and a message telling him he is amazing drawn on his hand. He realizes Tayama drew it on him while he was asleep and smiles warmly. Sasaki sits on his futon with a growling stomach, sighing that Tayama used a permanent oil marker to draw on his hand. Rain drips from a roof gutter outside. Back in the alleyway, Tayama greets Sasaki and congratulates him on his hard work. Sasaki walks up looking thoroughly exhausted and returns the greeting. Tayama asks him what is wrong and notes that he looks completely out of it, wondering if it is his awful boss again. Sasaki replies that it is not. Sasaki laments that his own body is the problem instead. Tayama is confused and Sasaki awkwardly holds up his hand to show her the permanent marker drawing. Sasaki weakly mutters that cigarettes are actually very bad for one's health. Goth discusses Sasaki's physical exam results with Yamada, questioning if his lungs require further monitoring and treatment. She notes that she now understands his situation. Goth explains that Sasaki is quitting smoking for his health, which cannot be helped. She notices Yamada looking downcast and asks what is wrong, while Yamada silently realizes Sasaki will no longer have a reason to visit the smoking area behind the store. Goth looks at Yamada and asks if she thinks Sasaki is the type of person who is unable to accept another side of person. Yamada declares with absolute certainty that she does not think Sasaki is that kind of person. Goth suggests that Yamada should simply tell Sasaki that she is the cashier from the second register, so they would no longer need any excuses to spend time together. Goth adds that while the idealized version of her in his heart might be gone, it would mean he is accepting her for who she truly is. Goth asks Yamada if she is even listening, but Yamada silently walks away. Goth immediately switches back to her bright customer service persona to greet an approaching shopper. As Goth assists her customer, Yamada walks away, reflecting that while the manager is right, she still has reservations. Yamada wonders to herself what it is she is so afraid of. Sasaki walks home in the dark, letting out a weary sigh. He is relieved that his long stretch of work is finally over and plans to go to the hospital tomorrow, though he still stumbles from sheer exhaustion. Sasaki resolves to greet her properly next time, but he suddenly turns around as he footsteps rapidly approaching from behind. Tayama sneaks up and slaps Sasaki on the back, causing him to scream in sudden fright. Sasaki stammers her name in shock, his heart racing. Tayama asks if he has any other plans tonight, and when he says he does not, she tells him to follow her. As they walk to the back of the store, Tayama begins to pull out her pack of cigarettes, but suddenly stops, remembering that she cannot smoke next to him anymore. Sasaki tells Tayama that she can go ahead and smoke. She sits down on a crate next to him, preparing her cigarette. Tayama explains that since this is the last time they are meeting like this, she wanted to get a taste of his second-hand smoke. Sasaki sucks on his lollipop and says he understands. Tayama asks if he can really quit smoking, and Sasaki admits he is worried himself, asking if she thinks he can do it. Tayama laughs and asks why he is even asking her. Sasaki quietly calls out Tayama's name while she stares down thoughtfully and smokes. Sasaki thanks Tayama for calling out to him when they first met in the alleyway, noting that they likely will not get to chat like this ever again. Tayama looks down in silence. Sasaki says that if she ever sees him inside the store, but Tayama cuts him off by holding a finger to his lips and shushing him. Tayama calls his name and prepares to confess the truth about her identity, but Sasaki gently cuts her off, telling her not to say it. Suddenly, Sasaki's phone begins to ring loudly, startling them both. Sasaki frantically apologizes and reaches for his pocket. Sasaki answers the phone and realizes it is the clinic calling about his physical exam results. He mentions his plans to visit them tomorrow, but freezes in utter shock at what they tell him next. Sasaki hangs up and sheepishly laughs, explaining that the clinic mixed up his results with someone else's, and his organs are actually in perfectly healthy shape. Tayama listens to him in silence. Enraged and embarrassed, Tayama delivers a massive slap to his neck, while Sasaki screams in pain and frantically apologizes for his mistake. Tayama aggressively punches his chest, mockingly congratulating him on his good health. Sasaki continues to apologize for making her worry, and she glares at him while muttering that she is glad he is all right. Sasaki sits with a deeply flushed face, feeling incredibly relieved that he can continue smoking and spending time with Tayama. Tayama watches his reaction closely. Sasaki suddenly opens his eyes wide in sudden shock as a realization hits him. Sasaki apologizes to Tayama for the phone interruption, but privately wonders to himself what she had been about to confess right before the call. Sasaki asks Tayama if she can repeat what she was about to say before the interruption. Tayama turns away and tells him to forget it, then leans in to light his cigarette with the tip of her own. Sasaki smokes quietly, thinking to himself that it is fine for now. The two sit quietly side by side on their crates, enjoying their smoke. Tayama tells him that she cannot forgive someone who makes her worry about them. Sasaki groans and apologizes once more, but sincerely thanks her for worrying about him. Garu holds up the paper rain dolls and scolds Yamada for hanging out for too long. Yamada, now back in her casual clothes, giggles and asks if they aren't so bad, while Garu grumbles that the doll of herself is so accurate it annoys her. Garu examines the remaining rain dolls and asks Yamada which one represents the puppy and which one is Sasaki. Yamada looks at them thoughtfully. Yamada giggles and admits she does not know either, leaving Garu completely shocked by her answer. Garu is thrilled to learn that Sasaki got his test results wrong and is not going to quit smoking. She turns around with a bright, excited smile to congratulate Yamada. Yamada flatly notes that everything is back to normal, silently wondering why the manager is so excited. Garu smirks to herself, thrilled that Sasaki will return to smoke today so she can keep having fun. Yamada's coworker asks if the company is running another promotion. Garu tells Yamada not to look so annoyed by it. Garu explains that since Yamada was named the alternate champion for the year's Smile Award, she has to participate in an interview and photo session. Yamada sighs and slaps her cheeks to put on a forced smile, wanting to get it over with quickly, while Garu remarks on how good she is at faking it. Yamada reflects on how much she misses her early days when she never smiled at work. The story flashes back to 8 years ago at the Super Fresh Market. A younger Yamada welcomes a customer with an incredibly stiff and awkward smile, only for Garu to bluntly tell her that she is terrible at it. Garu critiques her performance, pointing out that her eyes are dead, her mouth is twisted, and her voice is too deep. Yamada asks what exactly she did wrong, then laughs and asks if she simply failed at everything. Garu wonders how to train her, since Yamada is actually highly efficient at her duties. Yamada dejectedly replies that she is no good and keeps receiving customer complaints. Yamada bows deeply and apologizes to Garu for constantly causing her trouble. Garu watches her thoughtfully and calls out her name. Garu explains that it is actually the exact same customer filing all of those complaints, using her as an excuse to cause trouble for the store. Garu promises to handle that specific customer and help her with her reception skills, advising her not to be too stubborn and to simply do her best. Yamada quietly agrees, thinking that her manager is incredibly kind. Yamada recalls the trouble she caused, such as when an angry customer shouted at her about her attitude, yet Garu always stood up for her. The angry customer continues to scold the cashiers, demanding a more sincere apology from Yamada. Yamada looks down dejectedly and quietly apologizes once more. As the customer keeps berating Yamada, a younger Sasaki suddenly steps in to interrupt the confrontation. Sasaki confronts the customer, directly telling him that he is being way too loud. The customer angrily asks if he cannot see that he is in the middle of complaining to the cashier. Sasaki calmly responds that he heard exactly what was said. Sasaki calls out the customer for constantly bringing up irrelevant complaints and targeting Yamada during every visit, demanding that he stop. Goth and the other staff members watch in complete shock. The customer is completely defeated by Sasaki's logic, sighing and complaining about why Sasaki always interferes when he is in line. Sometime later, Sasaki stands outside the store smoking when Yamada approaches him in the alleyway. Her sudden greeting startles him. Yamada bows deeply to thank him for his help and apologizes for always slowing him down at checkout. Sasaki frantically waves his hands and insists that none of it was her fault. Yamada remains bowed, explaining that she wanted to apologize because she feels she simply does not know how to handle customers properly. Sasaki faces away to smoke, honestly admitting to her that he did not step in just to help her out. Sasaki explains that he was already highly annoyed from a stressful day at work, and seeing the customer scream at her simply pushed him to speak up. Sasaki adds that he got angry because the customer was dismissing the efforts of a cashier who always works fast and pays close attention to help him. Yamada is stunned to hear him praise her, as she always considered herself awful and lazy. Sasaki repeats her self-deprecating comment in complete disbelief. Sasaki directly asks her if she has been trying her absolute best this whole time, leaving Yamada completely speechless. Yamada recalls how she spent her days practicing her smile in front of a mirror and pushing herself to check out items as quickly as possible to make up for her shortcomings. Yamada suddenly bursts into tears right in front of him, leaving Sasaki completely shocked and wide-eyed. Sasaki frantically apologizes and asks if he made her cry. Wiping her face, she insists that she is not crying and is merely sweating, which leaves him utterly confused. Yamada continues to wipe away her tears and asks how he knew she was trying her best despite her struggles in dealing with customers. She recalls how her shortcomings constantly caused trouble for her manager and everyone else. Yamada cries into her sleeve, admitting that she genuinely loves her job and wants to do it properly. Sasaki stands with his back turned, quietly smoking and thinking to himself that this is the worst possible situation. Sasaki asks if she likes her job, and when she nods, he gently reassures her that is all that matters. Yamada looks at him with a softened expression. Sasaki adds that as long as she loves working at this store, she will eventually become the person she wants to be one day. Yamada listens to him in silence. Yamada looks up at him with a focused, intense gaze. Sasaki is suddenly startled by her proximity, frantically backing away and apologizing for being too close. Yamada quickly covers her face and claims that his cigarette smoke simply got into her eyes. Yamada suddenly bursts into laughter, leaving a completely bewildered Sasaki to ask what is wrong. Yamada giggles happily and tells him that he is overreacting, showing a bright, genuine smile. Yamada turns to Goth and asks her about the days before the store received its current name. Yamada asks Goth if she remembers the customer who chased away her persistent complainer. Goth replies that she sees too many arguments to remember, and Yamada admits that she cannot remember his face either. Yamada recalls how the man always smoked for a bit, after buying items, noting his messy hair, wrinkled clothes, and deep, dark circles under his eyes. Yamada notes that she never saw him again after they removed the front entrance ashtray due to customer complaints. Goth suggests to Yamada that the man is probably just smoking at another location now. Sasaki asks Tayama what she is doing as she silently shakes a stick over his head. Yamada asks if he wants a reward for his efforts in serving the guests, which leaves Sasaki feeling deeply touched. Sasaki wakes up in bed at dawn, thoroughly bewildered by the bizarre dream he just had. During a break, Yamada tells her coworker Ono that a customer named Sasaki confessed to being her fan. She admits that while it is a bit strange, she surprisingly does not dislike him, while a flustered Sasaki's memory is shown in the background. Ono wonders what Yamada would do if Sasaki turned out to be a dangerous person. Yamada casually replies that she would just hit him, leaving her coworker slightly amused and startled. Sasaki frequently purchases tasty rice crackers. He tells Tayama that their packaging makes them easy to with his coworkers and that they pair exceptionally well with beer. Tayama chuckles and comments that Sasaki behaves like an elderly female cashier. She jokingly imagines him working at the register trying to hand out snacks to the customers. While sitting at his office desk, Sasaki uses his fingers to pull up the corners of his mouth to practice his smile, keeping Tayama's earlier lesson in mind. Sasaki's co-worker notices his bizarre face pulling and silently worries that the stress of the job has finally broken Sasaki's mind. Feeling deep pity, he offers to treat Sasaki to a bar after work. Tayama sits in the alleyway and smiles as she remembers how funny Sasaki looked with a flower petal on his head the day before. Just then, Sasaki walks in and they exchange evening greetings. Sasaki notices Tayama staring at him with curiosity, unaware that he once again has white petals stuck to his head. Tayama tells him to pay more attention to his head during the spring, causing a flustered Sasaki to reach up and check his hair as Tayama bursts into loud laughter. Tayama grabs a can of coffee and tells Sasaki that she will drink it if he bought it. When Sasaki asks if she cannot drink coffee, she explains that she simply does not like the taste, but is fine with drinking it anyway. Tayama takes a sip of the coffee, but is immediately overwhelmed by the bitter taste, coughing violently as Sasaki watches her with a worried expression. Sasaki watches her struggle with the bitter coffee, thinking to himself that she should not force herself to drink it. Yamada's ears turn red first whenever she gets embarrassed. Sasaki has been blushing quite a lot lately. While on a smoke break, Sasaki mentions to his coworker that he has been worried about his blood pressure because he keeps blushing. His coworker bluntly advises him to buy a blood pressure monitor. Goth, a major fan of romance who loves sinking into shoujo manga, asks Yamada if anything has happened between her and Sasaki lately. Yamada is surprised, but admits that something actually has happened. Goth enthusiastically says that Sasaki told her a bizarre story about accidentally swapping his left and right socks, laughing about how he always tells her strange things. Yamada flatly offers her half-hearted congratulations. In a flashback, Sasaki nervously approaches a store cashier to ask where he can find a portable ashtray designed for women looking deeply embarrassed. Sasaki struggles to choose between two similar ashtrays in a floor full of women wanting to pick one quickly. He finally chooses one and asks the clerk to package it with a blue ribbon. At home, Tayama lies comfortably on her bed hugging the cute portable ashtray Sasaki gifted her with a soft smile. Back in the alleyway, Tayama asks if she can try on Sasaki's glasses. Sasaki warns her that his prescription is very strong, but she tells him not to worry. Tayama puts on the glasses but immediately becomes extremely dizzy, asking how he can see through them. Sasaki replies that they are perfect for him and very useful even if he does not wear them all the time. Yamada and her coworker work at the supermarket chatting about their tasks. Yamada tells her coworker about some work and the coworker responds with an indifferent comment. Goth stares intensely while thinking about how she has been curious for a long time about how Yamada manages to adjust the length of her hair. Yamada tells Goth that it is not that hard and explains the method of bundling the lower part, burying the inside, and covering it with the top section of hair. Sasaki is startled and asks if they are moving too fast in every sense when Goth suggests they are in the same generation and he can call her Goth-chan. Yamada wonders what those old people are blabbering about. Sasaki frantically denies being the type of person who calls people by their nicknames. Sasaki is at his computer when his coworker walks up and suggests they go have a smoke. Sasaki sulks and says it is all because of the weird things his coworker said to him before. The coworker asks if he really talked about cigarette brands with a young person and Sasaki confirms it. The coworker reacts in shock that the girl yanked his tie and suggests they had too much fun. Sasaki complains that the girl hates him now because of what happened. Yamada sits on her bed and thinks about how Sasaki must be more of an arm guy than a tummy guy after their previous interaction. Yamada looks at her reflection and decides to eat less ramen while she pinches the skin on her arm. Goth scolds Yamada for hanging out for too long while Yamada holds up two dolls and asks if they aren't so bad. Sasaki's internal voice notes that the doll looks so much like him that it makes him angry. Goth examines the paper dolls and asks which one represents the puppy and which one is Sasaki. Yamada giggles and admits she does not know either. Goth looks on in shock at her answer. Goth turns around excited and laughing that Sasaki got his test results wrong and will not be quitting smoking. Yamada silently wonders why the manager is so excited. Goth continues to smile, thinking that she can keep having fun now that Sasaki will be coming back to smoke. Two cars sit parked in the supermarket lot at night. Goth sits in the driver's seat holding her phone and looking at a manga while waiting. Goth taps on the steering wheel, noting that she does not really understand the shoujo manga she is reading, but its pacing still makes her cry. Yamada approaches the car window to apologize for keeping Goth waiting on her break. Goth tells Yamada to get in the car, explaining that a part-timer made a mistake with a double scan on a product, and she needs to go handle the refund for an elderly customer. Goth comments that the customer is in a different city district, making for a long drive. Yamada listens as they prepare to head out. The car engine starts up and they begin to drive away from the supermarket. Goth yells at Yamada to knock it off while Yamada continuously clicks her seatbelt buckle. Yamada remarks that it has been a while since she rode in Goth's car, and Goth asks if it has really been that long. Yamada notes that Yamada has found something she likes doing lately, so she does not come to see the manager as much. The manager explains that in the past, she often bothered Yamada when Yamada was going home or on break, but that spot has since been turned into a private smoking room where people can read manga. Yamada gives the manager a sly, knowing smile. Yamada asks if the manager has been lonely without her. The manager admits she has. The manager laments that she has taken care of Yamada for 8 years, since Yamada was a part-timer only for a middle-aged customer to snatch her away. Yamada asks the manager what she is talking about with a look of confusion. Yamada places a hand on the manager's shoulder, telling her that it is nothing to cry about. The manager sticks her tongue out at Yamada, clearly annoyed. The manager laughs and claims she is grateful to Sasaki because she gets to read manga alone now while Yamada sits sulking beside her. The manager tells Yamada not to sulk and asks her to show her usual smile. Yamada replies that she was just joking earlier. The manager tells Yamada that she doubts Yamada could have this kind of fun with Sasaki around. Yamada tells the manager she is still on the clock and will only stories about Sasaki if the manager buys her ramen on the way back. Sasaki eats ramen with his coworker, who comments on how good the meal is, but notes he can now only finish a medium portion. Sasaki's coworker apologizes to Sasaki, explaining he is leaving to celebrate his daughter's birthday. Sasaki waves goodbye to his coworker from his desk. Sasaki's coworker stands by his desk looking deep in thought while Sasaki sits at his computer. Sasaki's coworker looks at him and tells him that his greetings sound like a gal. Sasaki blushes and stammers in confusion as his coworker insists that he does sound like a gal. His coworker explains that the Sasaki he knows is supposed to be a plain, dull, boring, middle-aged man. Sasaki stands motionless in the office, wondering if it could be that he has inadvertently adopted a new persona. Tayama sits with a cigarette, casually wishing someone a good day with a trendy, youthful flair. Sasaki approaches Tayama at the store and tells her he was bothered by his colleague mentioning his greetings sounded like a youngster's. He asks her what kind of greeting he made. Sasaki realizes with a start that he has been unconsciously imitating Tayama's specific way of speaking, such as when she says good work. Tayama listens to him with a sharp, knowing look. Sasaki panics and backpedals, frantically insisting that the way he spoke was just something he said. Sasaki sits across from Tayama, sweating and apologizing, explaining that it is just how he usually talks. Tayama watches him calmly. Sasaki asks Tayama what she is trying to do by calling it that, while Tayama apologizes for making it sound like she was mocking him, explaining, she just calls it that in her head. Sasaki nervously explains that the way Tayama spoke earlier was of a different kind, noting that her specific observations have a unique quality to them. Sasaki looks confused, while Tayama stares at him and asks how there can be that many different kinds of greetings. Tayama tells Sasaki there are quite a lot, pointing out how he was dragging out the last syllable earlier like she does. Tayama abruptly stands up to leave, prompting Sasaki to ask if she is already going back since her cigarette has not even finished burning. Tayama politely tells Sasaki she has to leave first and thanks him for his time while she puts out her cigarette. Sasaki is left alone and stunned, wondering if Tayama was unconscious of her own speech patterns until he pointed them out. Later, a coworker tells Yamada that she is quite whimsical sometimes, especially when she is at the cash register. Yamada asks if she made any strange greetings, unaware of the habits she has passed on. Yamada flashes a bright professional smile at a customer while handing them a discount coupon for ice cream. Sasaki beams with happiness as he accepts the coupon, expressing his sincere gratitude. Yamada watches Sasaki depart from the store, noting that he was able to leave early today. The next morning, Yamada finds Sasaki's lost commuter pass on the floor and feels frustrated by his clumsiness, wondering if he is for real. Yamada excuses herself from the register, telling her coworker she will be away for a little while. Yamada spots Sasaki walking away outside and calls out his name. Sasaki turns around in surprise while Yamada thinks to herself that shouting in her natural voice will not get his attention effectively. Sasaki continues walking and Yamada decides she will just have to catch up to him. Yamada runs quickly to catch up as Sasaki walks down the street. Sasaki keeps walking and Yamada wonders why he is moving so fast. Yamada catches up to Sasaki breathless and panting while Sasaki looks on in shock at her sudden appearance. He marvels at the stamina she displayed to chase him down. Yamada hands Sasaki his commuter pass and he is stunned that she went out of her way to bring it to him so he would have it for work. Yamada blushes and tells him it was no trouble at all. Sasaki thinks to himself that Yamada is truly a very kind person. Sasaki and Yamada sit together on crates while smoking. Sasaki muses that he never would have noticed the pass, and Yamada smokes quietly beside him. Tayama smokes and reflects on how she was sweaty and out of breath earlier, wondering if she actually chased after him. Sasaki apologizes for talking so much, and Tayama tells him he should really be grateful to Yamada. Sasaki agrees. Sasaki resolves to appreciate Yamada's kindness more while Tayama internally reflects on how sweaty and out of breath she was. Sasaki stands outside and complains that his current situation is the worst. Sasaki walks outside in the heat complaining about his boss turning off the air conditioning and forbidding cooling patches just because the boss felt cold. Sasaki arrives to find Tayama soaking her feet in a tub of water while smoking. He notes her creative way of cooling down and she replies she does it often in the summer. Tayama asks if Sasaki is jealous of her setup and he admits that he is. Sasaki complains about the ban on air conditioning and cooling patches at his job. Tayama notes that his boss must be brainless and realizes why Sasaki has been looking so steamed lately. Tayama suddenly tells Sasaki to take his socks off, confusing him. Tayama offers to spray his feet with a hose. Sasaki hesitates and nervously declines, unsure about sharing the tub with her while glancing at her bare feet. Sasaki blushes intensely and becomes deeply flustered. Tayama glares at him and sarcastically apologizes for not meeting his expectations, prompting a panicked Sasaki to beg her to stop apologizing. Tayama demands he take his socks off immediately, so Sasaki complies and begins removing his shoes and socks. Sasaki dips his bare foot into the water tub and groans in relief. Tayama laughs and tells him he sounds like an old man. Sasaki reflects on how incredibly good the water feels after walking on hot concrete for hours, but then suddenly notices that it is extremely cold. Sasaki is suddenly blasted right in the face with a stream of water. Tayama stands before him holding a small water gun, chuckling and apologizing while admitting she sprayed him on purpose. Tayama smiles and explains she was planning on using the water gun when he came over. Sasaki watches her in stunned silence. Sasaki asks what is wrong with her while Tayama states that getting splashed with water feels nice in the summer. Sasaki concludes that it was just a prank. At the office, Sasaki's coworker cries to him that the new graduates quit and their boss yelled at him. He weeps that Sasaki is the only thing keeping him going while Sasaki listens, looking completely exhausted. Yamada beams with a bright, welcoming smile at the cash register. A depressed-looking Sasaki reflects that he has not seen Yamada lately. Sasaki worries that his timing is off since he has not seen her at the register for 2 weeks, his mind filling with anxious thoughts about her getting injured or resigning. He stands distracted while another cashier hands back his point card. The cashier waves her hand in front of Sasaki's face to get his attention to give him his change. Startled, Sasaki snaps out of his daze and frantically apologizes. Sasaki reminisces about Yamada's bright smile and thinks that as long as she is doing well, he is fine with it. Walking away, he questions why he is worrying about her since he is just a customer, realizing that getting too involved is just asking for trouble. Tayama suddenly appears behind Sasaki and asks what he is thinking about startling him. He calls out her name in surprise and she greets him warmly, glad to run into him. Sasaki asks if she is finished with work and Tayama explains she is going to shop and head home before wishing him well. However, she suddenly turns and asks him what he meant when he said that he is fine if Yamada is doing well, sending Sasaki into a sudden panic. As he realizes he spoke his thoughts aloud. Sasaki tries to stammer out an explanation, but Tayama just stares at him, intently demanding an answer with her silent gaze. Sasaki lets out a huge sigh of relief when Tayama casually drops the subject, though she tells him she will ask him about it when they get to the back. Tayama gestures to her mouth and suggests they head to the back for a smoke break, prompting Sasaki to follow her. Tayama sits down on a plastic crate in the quiet back alley and begins smoking her cigarette. Tayama lets out a quiet chuckle as she takes a drag from her cigarette. Tayama laughs loudly and summarizes that Sasaki simply misses Yamada because she hasn't been around lately. A deeply embarrassed Sasaki complains that she did not need to put it so bluntly. Tayama explains that Yamada is not sick, but has actually been away studying for the upcoming staff promotion exam on the manager's recommendation. Sasaki is surprised to hear this, listening closely to her explanation. Sasaki lets out a massive sigh of relief upon learning the truth, while Tayama watches his reaction with a quiet look. Sasaki suddenly gasps in shock as a realization hits him while Tayama eyes him knowingly. Tayama teasingly remarks how lucky he is that Yamada did not quit and asks if he is happy, but a blushing Sasaki insists he is merely relieved. Sasaki begins to awkwardly apologize to Tayama as well, leaving her slightly confused as she asks what he means. Tayama quietly tells Sasaki to calm down, which confuses him. When he asks what she said, she claims it was nothing, while internally reflecting that she should not have made it sound like she was asking about Yamada in the first place. Tayama takes a drag of her cigarette and remarks that things will be back to normal soon regardless of whether Yamada passes or fails her exam. She adds that Yamada really is impressive. Tayama silently stares ahead as she continues to smoke. Sasaki gently smiles, noting that Yamada is studying while working and expressing his sincere hope that everything goes well for her. Tayama quietly watches him from the side, holding her cigarette. Tayama suddenly nudges Sasaki to get his attention, calling out his name and startling him. Tayama rummages through her belongings and tears a small piece of paper from a notepad, handing it to Sasaki along with a pen and telling him to write on it. Sasaki asks what he should write, and Tayama suggests writing a message telling Yamada to do her best, leaving him thoroughly confused. Sasaki wonders if this is some kind of official store event, but Tayama tells him not to overthink it and to just write a message down. Sasaki hums thoughtfully and begins writing down a message on the paper using his clipboard as a hard surface, while Tayama sits quietly beside him. Sasaki hands the note back to her, hoping it is acceptable, and Tayama smiles gently as she accepts it and thanks him. Tayama casually tells him she will hand the note directly to Yamada, causing a horrified Sasaki to scream in panic and tell her to wait. Sasaki frantically chases after her, begging her not to deliver the note, but she insists it is fine. Sasaki panics, arguing that Yamada will not be happy to receive something from a mere customer, worrying that getting a note from an old man might actually ruin her motivation, and wishing he had written it better if he had known she would actually see it. An internal thought declares that the note will actually motivate Yamada. Tayama presses the folded note against Sasaki's face and confidently guarantees that Yamada will be motivated by his words. Sasaki quietly holds his cigarette and mutters that he will trust her judgment since she is Yamada's colleague, picturing the two of them as good friends. Tayama tells Sasaki that she will give him a note in return. Tayama adds that he can read the note whenever he is angry with his terrible boss. Later on, at the supermarket, someone calls out. Goth informs Yamada that headquarters called to let her know she successfully passed the exam. Yamada expresses her relief to the manager and holds up a peace sign. Goth wonders what changed, noting that Yamada was originally not motivated to take the exam at all. Yamada laughs, remembering how she had reluctantly studied when her manager pushed her to. Goth continues to question Yamada about her sudden determination to study. Yamada replies that she is simply trying to meet expectations and starts adjusting her hair. Yamada smiles as she holds Sasaki's folded note, quietly reflecting that her clueless fan even gave her a good luck charm. The note from Sasaki encourages her to do her best and promises that he will be rooting for her. Back at his office, Sasaki gets heavily scolded by his boss. His coworker asks if he got yelled at again, and Sasaki explains there was a dispute with a client he recently signed a contract with. In the middle of his stressful workday, Sasaki suddenly remembers the paper that Tayama gave him earlier. Sasaki reaches into his pocket to find the note, recalling that she told him to read it when he was angry. Sasaki unfolds the note to find a drawing of a stick figure holding a baseball bat, along with a message from Tayama telling him to deliver a good hit to his boss. Sasaki covers his face and begins laughing quietly to himself, which completely frightens and confuses his coworker sitting next to him. His coworker asks what is wrong, and Sasaki assures him it is nothing, privately thinking about how typical of Tayama the message was. Sasaki looks down at the note Tayama gave him once more before folding it back up. He remembers Tayama giving it to him and telling him that he could look at it whenever he was angry with his terrible boss. Feeling comforted, Sasaki lets out a soft chuckle as he holds the note. Suddenly, his boss loudly reprimands him, demanding he get up from his desk and start moving. Sasaki immediately grabs his briefcase and rushes out of the office, calling out that he is on his way to work. Sasaki realizes he crumpled the note in his panic and carefully tries to smooth it out. Relieved that it is not torn, he decides to tuck it into his phone case, hoping it will bring him some good luck. Later in the alleyway behind the supermarket, Tayama greets him. Tayama asks the news that Yamada passed her promotion exam, which makes Sasaki beam with joy. Sasaki sits beside her and awkwardly mentions that she should not that kind of news with an outsider like him, while Tayama giggles at how incredibly happy he is. Sasaki wonders if Yamada's success was thanks to his good luck note. When he asks Tayama if she actually delivered it to her, she lights his cigarette and replies that she had already promised, even if she was the one who forced him to write it. Sasaki humbly says that she passed because of her own hard work. He then reaches into his pocket, but something accidentally slips out and falls to the ground. Sasaki continues to downplay his contribution, but he suddenly screams in absolute panic as he looks down at the ground, leaving Tayama thoroughly confused. His phone case has dropped face down onto the pavement. Sasaki looks on in complete horror while Tayama quietly gazes down at the dropped item. Sasaki desperately reaches down to retrieve it, crying out that he dropped it, but Tayama swoops in with incredible speed and grabs the case first. Tayama flips the case over to find her handwritten note tucked inside. She stares at it silently while Sasaki watches her, blushing in deep embarrassment. Tayama holds up the case and continues to hum loudly as she inspects her own note, while a highly nervous Sasaki sweats and waits for her response. Tayama grins and teases Sasaki, pointing out that while he claimed his note didn't help Yamada much, he is certainly taking incredibly good care of hers. Tayama suddenly slaps his phone case flat onto Sasaki's forehead. Keeping the case pressed to his head, Tayama asks him if the note she wrote actually helped. Sasaki, blushing intensely, quietly admits that it did. Sasaki lowers his head in embarrassment and explains that he kept it as a talisman. Sasaki remains deeply embarrassed while Tayama watches him with a highly puzzled expression. Later that night in her apartment, Yamada lies on her bed looking at her phone, suddenly wondering what exactly Sasaki meant when he called her note a talisman. Yamada searches for the definition of the word on her phone, but quickly gives up reading because the explanation is too long. Yamada tosses her phone aside and reflects that a talisman is essentially just a protective charm. She finds his phrasing strange but softly notes that he kept her message even though it was completely crumpled. Curling up on her bed, Yamada thinks to herself that she would have gladly written him a brand new note right away if he had only asked for one. Sometime later at a client's office, Sasaki smiles warmly as a cat drapes itself over his shoulders. The client apologizes for the cats, but Sasaki assures him it is perfectly fine, praising the innovative idea of having animals in the workplace. Sasaki sits on a couch and chuckles, noting that maybe his own company is lacking cats. The client agrees that having them around livens up the workplace, though one of the cats glares intensely at Sasaki. Sasaki notices that the black collar on the cat's neck looks similar to something he has seen before. He is suddenly cut off as the cat snubs him and walks away, leaving his client to laugh and point out that the cat does not seem to like him very much. Later, Sasaki arrives at the supermarket and walks through the entrance doors. Yamada greets Sasaki with a bright, welcoming smile and praises him for his hard work today. Yamada greets Sasaki as he walks in wearing a cardigan over her work clothes, which seems to surprise him as she secretly observes him closely. Yamada points to Sasaki's suit and mentions that he has a lot of fur on it, confusing him. Sasaki realizes it is cat fur, prompting Yamada to ask if he recently bought a cat. Sasaki explains that a client he recently visited has cats in the office and that they have been biting him a lot. Yamada secretly finds him highly likable as she imagines a cat climbing on him. Sasaki mentions that there was one cat that did not like him at all, and Yamada chuckles casually, suggesting that the cat must be a bit like Tayama. She instantly freezes as she realizes she nearly let her alternate identity slip. Sasaki adds that the cat even wore a collar just like hers, which leaves Yamada internally questioning his choice of words. Yamada is internally shocked that Sasaki thinks she wears a collar, while a completely oblivious Sasaki confirms that he was referring to the black neck piece Tayama always wears. Yamada suddenly grabs Sasaki's tie and pulls him close, calling his name and making him blush in complete confusion. Yamada lectures Sasaki, stating that a collar is something meant for animals, not humans, and firmly points out that Tayama is neither a dog nor a cat. Yamada taps her finger against him, telling him to listen closely. She yanks his tie and loudly corrects him, shouting that the accessory is called a choker. Yamada sternly asks if he understands, and a completely terrified and blushing Sasaki quickly stammers his agreement. Later, back in the alleyway, Tayama touches her neck and asks Sasaki if he knows what her accessory is called. A nervous, sweating Sasaki quickly replies that he knows it is a choker, and Tayama laughs, sarcastically praising him for being so clever. Tayama smirks and asks if someone taught him the word, which sends Sasaki into a sudden shock, as he frantically denies it, insisting he knew it all along. Chibai Tayama pulls Sasaki on a leash attached to a collar, demanding to know what he meant by calling it a collar. Sometime later, the scene transitions back to the supermarket. Yamada eats a snack and quietly wonders what her coworkers meant by their previous conversation. Another coworker acts like a ghost to tease a colleague who is quietly snacking. Manhwa s a rumor that anyone smoking alone at the back of the store can hear a strange flapping sound, which apparently even scared the vegetable clerk into quitting smoking, prompting them to suggest they need Yamada's brave presence. Yamada casually dismisses the ghost story, asserting that she is far more terrified of double pricing errors at the register, making her coworkers laugh. Her coworkers praise Yamada for not being afraid of anything, while she quietly wonders about the source of the rumors. A commuter pass scans at a train station gate. Sasaki walks through the station after a long day, looking thoroughly exhausted. Sasaki looks forward to buying meat and beer on his way home and decides to stop by the supermarket, recalling how welcoming Yamada always is and how cute she looks. Upon arriving at the back alley, Sasaki finds it completely silent and empty, realizing that neither Tayama nor Yamada were around today, and laments his terrible timing. Tayama suddenly sneaks up behind him and blows air onto his neck, causing him to scream in sudden fright. Tayama casually greets him, and Sasaki gasps her name in shock. As they sit down on their crates, Tayama chuckles and comments that he always has a great reaction, which a still startled Sasaki awkwardly agrees with. Tayama lights her cigarette and mentions she heard that it is supposed to show up here. Sasaki asks if she means ghosts, and Tayama confirms she does, leading him to let out a quiet laugh. Sasaki flicks on his lighter to light his cigarette and remarks that he would absolutely hate to see them. Sasaki gets highly flustered and panics when Tayama scoots closer to him. He stammers that he would hate to see ghosts, while privately thinking about how he has not been able to find Yamada anywhere. Tayama comments on how amusing Sasaki is and asks why he is not making a fuss about the ghost rumor. Sasaki asks what she means by making a fuss, and Tayama points out that he seems completely unbothered by a ghost supposedly showing up in this exact spot. Sasaki admits that he honestly does not mind the idea of a ghost, prompting an intrigued Tayama to ask why. Sasaki explains that dealing with living people is hard enough as it is, listing work-related stress like his boss, clients, overtime, and workplace harassment, while letting out a weary laugh. Tayama is disappointed because she expected him to be scared out of his wits, so she directly asks if he is actually afraid of those kinds of things. Tayama suddenly whirls around to face him, startling Sasaki and causing him to look at her in surprise. Tayama looms over him with a highly intense, serious expression and declares that she is not scared at all, causing a flustered Sasaki to quickly apologize for suggesting otherwise. Tayama looks down quietly and softly mutters a greeting. She repeats that she heard something is supposed to show up in this very alleyway. Tayama turns away as Sasaki nervously tries to change the subject. Sasaki waves his hand and apologizes for asking such a weird question, explaining that he was just trying to keep the conversation going as older men often do, and reassures her there was no hidden meaning behind it. Tayama quietly smokes, reflecting on how he just went with the flow, while a cheerful Sasaki tells her not to think anything of it and invites her to sit back down and smoke. Suddenly, a loud thud resonates from the back of the alley, causing Sasaki to look over in surprise, while Tayama sits back down on her crate. Sasaki hears a strange flapping and clacking sound and decides to investigate, telling Tayama to stay where she is while she looks on in confusion. Sasaki walks forward, accidentally dropping his cigarette as Tayama calls out his name. Sasaki suddenly runs back in sheer panic, screaming in terror. In his blind panic, Sasaki backs straight into Tayama. Sasaki frantically apologizes for bumping into her and asks if she is hurt. Behind him, Tayama tightly clutches the back of his suit jacket. Tayama presses her forehead against his back and tightly holds onto his jacket, leaving Sasaki completely stunned. They stand closely together in silence as she holds onto him. Sasaki gently reassures her that it is okay. Sasaki tells her to take a look at what is actually there. Sasaki reveals that the source of the noise is simply a friendly dog panting and licking the air, leaving them both staring in speechless relief. Sasaki notes that it is clearly a pet dog, pointing out that it is wearing a collar. Suddenly, the back door slams open as Goth steps out, calling out to the dog, which causes a startled Sasaki and Tayama to jolt in surprise once again. Goth observes the pair and notes that it looks like something interesting happened between them, asking what the big deal is, while Sasaki calls out her name in a sweat and Tayama stands silently behind him. Goth asks in surprise if it is a customer's dog as the dog barks happily. Goth pats the dog, Daigoro lecturing him for wandering outside. She then explains to Sasaki and Tayama that one of their regular elderly customers won a lottery trip, but had no one to watch her dog, so she took charge of looking after him and brings him along to the store occasionally. Goth leads Daigoro away on his leash, waving goodbye and telling Sasaki and Tayama to pack up and head home immediately. Goth looks back and asks Tayama to tell her what happened later, leaving the pair standing in silence before Tayama mutters that her manager is highly self-centered. Sasaki decides to put out his cigarette and call it a night. Tayama acknowledges this as he bids her goodbye and walks away. Sasaki calls out an apology from behind her for bumping into her earlier. As Sasaki walks away, Tayama looks after him in silence, quietly reflecting on how he knew she was just a person yet still comforted her by telling her everything was going to be okay. Tayama stands alone, running her hand through her hair with a small, embarrassed smile. A loud, dramatic sound suddenly startles the group. Sometime later at the supermarket, a quiet laugh is heard. The supermarket employees gather around Daigoro, with Manhwa teasingly complaining that Goth shouldn't have kept such a cute dog all to herself, while Ono wonders what his name is. Yamada smiles with a devious grin, happily telling her coworkers that the dog's name is Sasaki. Manhwa shakes the dog's paw and calls him Sasaki-chan, while Ono praises him as a good boy, all while Goth watches the scene unfold from behind. Enraged by the joke, Goth screams Yamada's name in pure fury. A phone screen displays a cliché horror movie scene where a ghost chases a terrified man. Yamada watches the movie on her phone, flinching and sweating in fear as a terrifying scream erupts from the screen. Yamada questions why anyone would ever make such a scary movie, completely terrified when Goth suddenly calls out to her. Yamada jolts in surprise at her manager's sudden presence, while Goth casually asks what the big deal is. Goth yawns and explains that she has been dealing with trouble since morning and just wants to go home to sleep. Yamada ignores her complaint and urges her to stay and watch the horror movie with her. Goth asks why she is watching horror movies when she is so easily scared. Yamada's eye twitches as she explains she is trying to overcome her fear. Yamada recalls Sasaki asking if she was afraid of ghosts and realizes that if she doesn't overcome her fear, she will feel like she is losing to him. Goth quietly reflects on how tough it must have been for Sasaki to get told off after showing so much concern for her. Goth teases Yamada, claiming she is just too embarrassed to get spooked alone and wants to drag someone else into her misery. Yamada pouts and accuses her manager of reading too many manga. Goth relents, stating she will leave after having just one smoke, which surprises Yamada. Yamada flatters Goth by calling her beautiful and rich, telling her how much she likes her, which only prompts her manager to bluntly tell her to shut up. Goth sits down right next to Yamada and asks if she is actually trying to overcome her fear. Yamada holds her phone and assures her that she is. Yamada tries to block her view by keeping her eyes half closed and blowing smoke onto the phone screen, prompting Goth to scold her for cheating. Goth stands up to leave, telling Yamada that she is not even trying and can never win against Sasaki at this rate. Yamada tries to get her to stay. Goth yells that Yamada is just a stubborn, scaredy cat and tells her to just scare Sasaki back to satisfy her competitive urge. Yamada covers her face and apologizes. Ono suddenly opens the door to inform Garu that an angry customer is demanding to see the manager because the assistant manager will not do asking if she is up for handling it. Garu sighs and gets up telling Ono it is no problem while Yamada jokingly offers her condolences. Yamada sits alone on her crate, completely losing interest in watching the movie by herself, but she suddenly spots a weary Sasaki walking down the alleyway. Yamada suddenly jumps out and screams his name, causing a startled Sasaki to flinch and yell out an apology to his boss, before realizing it is actually Tayama peeking out at him. Sasaki greets her while trying to calm his racing heart, sheepishly admitting that her sudden shout completely freaked him out and made him scream, which leaves Tayama looking thoughtful. Tayama takes a drag of her cigarette and smiles, admitting that hearing him scream makes her feel a little bit better. Sasaki is confused and asks what she is talking about, but she dismisses it and tells him to just come over and smoke, which he agrees to. Sometime later, the scene transitions back to the supermarket at night. Sasaki walks into the supermarket as the automatic doors slide open, immediately noticing a freshly baked sweet potato stand set up for autumn. Sasaki looks at the stand with nostalgia, remembering how as a kid he would run out of his house and chase after the sweet potato vendors whenever he heard them nearby. Garu suddenly creeps up behind him and whispers her recommendation as the manager, causing a startled Sasaki to yell out in fright once again. Sasaki recovers and greets the manager, who reveals that only one sweet potato is left. When she mentions she is there to put a discount sticker on it, Sasaki gets excited. Sasaki mentions he was already planning on buying it, so he is lucky to get a discount. Hearing this, Garu immediately shoves the sweet potato bag into his hands without applying the sticker and walks away, declaring that she is the lucky one since she doesn't have to discount it anymore. Later, Sasaki meets up with Tayama in the alley, who notes that the last sweet potato sold out. Sasaki holds his purchase and nervously laughs, explaining that the manager tricked him into buying it at full price, remarking on how skilled she is at doing business. Tayama offers to split the sweet potato with Sasaki and pay him for her half, but Sasaki tells her not to worry about payment since he was not sure if he could eat the whole thing anyway. Sasaki tears the sweet potato in half using a paper napkin. Sasaki hands the portioned sweet potato over to Tayama. Sasaki realizes Tayama has not finished her cigarette yet and questions if she should be eating, while Tayama simply asks what of it. Tayama catches the sweet potato Sasaki tosses to her after mentioning that smoking would get in the way. Tayama takes a bite of the sweet potato while still holding her cigarette, while Sasaki does the same. Tayama continues to chew while keeping the cigarette in her hand. Tayama munches on the sweet potato and sticks her tongue out slightly. Tayama takes a long drag from her cigarette after eating. Tayama exhales smoke and thanks Sasaki for the food while a dazed Sasaki holds his portion. Tayama asks Sasaki if he would like her half, noting that his way of eating left a big impression on her and she hopes he will eat more. Sasaki stammers in surprise, asking if she saw the look on his face when he eats. Tayama blushes and calls Sasaki a pervert. Sasaki panics and asks what she means, while Tayama apologizes and says she did not mean anything by it, though she calls him a pervert again. Sasaki tells her to stop looking since he is going to eat the rest. Yamada finishes her shift and exchanges a polite farewell with her coworker, thanking her for the work. Yamada internally wonders why she has not seen Sasaki lately and worries about his well-being while deciding to have a smoke before heading home. Yamada reaches into her pocket and realizes that the puppy-shaped keychain Sasaki gave her is missing, leaving her in a state of shock. Yamada mentally retraces her steps and daily routines, searching through various memories to figure out where she could have lost the keychain. Yamada returns to the store and desperately searches for the missing item by rummaging through the storage area and checking the trash cans. The manager walks in and asks Yamada what is going on. The manager sits and asks Yamada if she is not earning enough money to live on, clearly misinterpreting the situation. Yamada ignores the manager's comment and asks if she has seen her missing ashtray, which is where she kept the keychain. The manager recognizes the item as the blue puppy and bone keychain Sasaki gave Yamada and mentions she has seen Yamada using it lately. Yamada continues to search the area while the manager notes that Yamada usually does not care about such small things, teasing her for being so attached to it. Yamada stands up and sulks because the ashtray is gone, while the manager laughs and points out that Yamada is still planning to smoke without it. The manager asks Yamada if she checked the store entrance, prompting Yamada to ask if she meant the area around the recycling boxes. The manager reminds Yamada that she was responsible for cleaning that area earlier, and Yamada realizes the keychain must be gone. Sasaki arrives at the store after finishing an intense project and yawns, hoping to find Yamada at the cash register. Yamada rustles through some items near the register and Sasaki calls out to her in surprise. Sasaki hesitates to approach because he is unsure if he should greet her while she is working, fearing he will be a bother either way. Sasaki takes a deep breath and reminds himself to act natural so he does not startle her. Yamada suddenly spots something on the floor near the register. Yamada realizes she has dropped the puppy-shaped keychain and her hand reaches down to touch the small object on the ground. Sasaki approaches and thanks Yamada for her work, causing her to jolt in surprise. Yamada inadvertently drops the keychain she just picked up. Yamada stares in shock as the dropped keychain rolls away, realizing she might be exposed if she picks it up in front of Sasaki, while Sasaki watches her with a confused expression. The small object skids across the floor and stops. Sasaki picks up the object and wonders if it is a toy, while Yamada looks on in distress. A young boy suddenly smacks Sasaki and demands he give back his Beyblade, while Yamada and the boy's mother look on in shock. Director Misawa arrives and apologizes to Sasaki for the boy's bad manners. Director Misawa points to Sasaki and jokingly introduces him as Yamada's number 28 fan, while Yamada tells her to stop giving people weird nicknames. Yamada insists that is not the case, as the mother tells the boy to thank Sasaki properly for saving his toy. Sasaki laughs and claims he did not do anything, telling the boy that Yamada was the one who found the toy for him. Yamada internally grumbles about the trouble she went through for a brat's toy, while the child asks Sasaki what he should eat to become as tall as him. 2 days later, Yamada sits in the alleyway still struggling to find the lost keychain, while Daigoro the dog approaches her and barks. Yamada talks to the dog, telling him that she lost something important and needs his help. Yamada describes the missing keychain as a blue circle with a puppy and bone design that she knows is a cute item that would take courage for a middle-aged man to buy. Yamada muses that Sasaki gave it to her as a present even though she told him it was unnecessary, and she notices how relieved he looks whenever she uses it in front of him. Yamada sighs, realizing she needs to apologize to Sasaki for losing his gift. Yamada looks at the dog and smiles faintly while the dog keeps his eyes closed. Yamada decides there is no point in venting her frustrations to the dog and moves to step out of the alleyway. Sasaki happens to be standing nearby and overhears the commotion while Daigoro the dog barks and wags his tail. Sasaki crouches down behind some crates, sweating and blushing in a panic as he realizes how nerve-wracking the situation is. Sasaki wonders why he is hiding and realizes he is just eavesdropping on Yamada because he feels awkward. Sasaki watches from his hiding spot, internally repeating to himself that he must apologize to her. Sasaki stares ahead, focused and determined. Sasaki crouches near the dog, reflecting on how he feels remarkably happy that Yamada treasures his gift so much despite how depressed she has been lately, even calling himself dumb for feeling that way. Sasaki speaks to the dog, suggesting they go for a walk around the store together. Yamada smiles warmly while working at the cash register, professionally telling Sasaki the total is 1,800 yen. Yamada listens silently as Sasaki apologizes for bothering her, while she works, noting that he will apologize to her properly when they go to the back alley next time. Sasaki holds out the recovered keychain in his palm and asks Yamada to hand it to Tayama for him. Yamada stares at him with wide, stunned eyes. Sasaki explains he found the keychain in the sewage drain outside and cleaned it up, then asks if she can please take it. Yamada jolts as she takes the keychain from Sasaki, their hands brushing for a moment. Yamada's eyes widen in absolute shock. Yamada asks him in disbelief if it was really in the sewage drain. Yamada is visibly moved and teary-eyed as she thanks Sasaki for helping her, while Sasaki smiles and says it is just a coincidence that he found it. Sasaki stands completely frozen with a shocked expression as he realizes what he has just done. Sasaki suddenly panics, stammering that it was just a coincidence and that he will leave it to her before hurriedly rushing away. Yamada looks down at the keychain in her hand with a stunned expression, holding it tightly. Sasaki walks away from the store, his footsteps clicking rapidly against the floor as he retreats. Sasaki glances down to notice that his suit sleeve is covered in dirt and smudges. Yamada asks Sasaki why his clothes are so dirty if he just happened to find it. Yamada smiles gently as she holds up the puppy keychain she recovered. Yamada thinks to herself that Sasaki is an eavesdropper, but she still silently thanks him for his effort. Yamada laughs and asks the dog Daigoro if he has been chasing after girls while the dog sits calmly by the manager. Sasaki speaks with a coworker outside a building asking if he used to own a dog. The coworker jokes that Sasaki must be lonely and desperate for companionship, but Sasaki insists that is not true and argues that dogs do not like men who are overworked and have no family. The coworker asks what kind of dog food Sasaki used to buy, and Sasaki recalls the brand Emi-chan used to purchase. The coworker questions if Sasaki intends to eat the dog food himself, while Sasaki frantically takes notes and thanks him for the information. Sasaki walks toward the supermarket entrance carrying a bag of dog food, hoping it will be a sufficient reward for Daigoro. Sasaki hears a rustling sound and turns to see Daigoro's tail wagging near a doorway. Sasaki smiles and thanks Daigoro for helping him find the item earlier. The dog looks happy and tells Sasaki not to worry about it, leaving Sasaki completely shocked and trembling. Sasaki apologizes for interrupting Tayama, who tells him he is not interrupting as she waves at him while sitting with the dog. Tayama notes that Sasaki seems to have some business with Daigoro, causing Sasaki to jolt in surprise. Sasaki mentally calculates that Tayama just received her ashtray back from Yamada, worrying that she will realize he helped find it, and he panics about what to do without worrying her. Tayama demands that Sasaki be honest and tell her he found the ashtray, asking how she can give him a return present if he does not admit it. Sasaki holds out a package of dog food and tells her he wanted to give a gift to Daigoro, leaving Tayama unimpressed. Tayama narrows her eyes and asks why they have become so close so suddenly. Daigoro bites into the package of dog food while Sasaki stares at the dog in sheer panic. Sasaki laughs nervously and tells the dog not to worry about it, adding that his colleagues always say he looks like a dog, which is why he feels a fondness for Daigoro. Tayama sighs and reaches out to pat Sasaki on the head. Tayama holds up the keychain and begins to mention that she heard he just happened to find it. Tayama looks at Sasaki while holding the keychain, and Sasaki waits nervously for her next words. Daigoro barks at Sasaki while Sasaki wonders if he should have left the dog alone and asks what he was about to say. A loud, shrill scream erupts inside the supermarket. Sasaki stands in the aisle holding rice crackers while a young girl cries out for her mother in a panic. Sasaki wonders if he is receiving divine punishment for getting off work early and decides to bring the lost child to the front desk. Sasaki offers to take the lost child to a staff member if she does not mind an uncle like him helping her. The child cries louder, screaming for her mother and calling him a scary uncle, deeply wounding Sasaki as he internally begs for someone to come save him as well. Tayama suddenly appears behind them, and a deeply relieved Sasaki tearfully calls out her name. She tells Sasaki that he is a very unlucky person before observing the crying girl and realizing she is a lost child. Tayama reassures the little girl that everything will be fine and promises they will find her mother, quickly suggesting they go to a place where she can see her mother. Sasaki watches in mild surprise as the little girl looks up at Tayama with large tear-filled eyes. The child suddenly bursts into even louder tears, wailing that the older girl is scary too, leaving both Tayama and Sasaki standing there in stunned silence. The manager suddenly rushes over with a bright, welcoming smile, enthusiastically telling them to leave the lost child in her capable hands. Sasaki praises the manager's incredible skill as she easily scoops up the now quiet child, telling the girl they will go find her worried mother and thanking Sasaki and Tayama for their help. Tayama silently takes a drag from her cigarette, looking deeply annoyed. Later in the alleyway, Sasaki awkwardly laughs and admits he really does not know how to be nice to kids. He praises the manager for making the child stop crying so quickly, noting that she is in charge of the cashiers. Tayama glares with intense irritation and sarcastically agrees that a professional is really something else. Tayama aggressively points at Sasaki and declares that she could easily make kids fall head over heels for her if she used her true power. She insists that was not even her final form, shouting that she could easily win them over if she used his favorite Yamada smile. Sasaki looks completely confused and stammers her name while Tayama suddenly turns away and falls entirely silent as she realizes what she just blurted out. Sasaki remains thoroughly bewildered while Tayama side-eyes him and privately grumbles that the dense blockhead does not understand her feelings at all. Tayama lets out a heavy sigh, turns around, and suddenly points her finger, leaving Sasaki even more startled and confused. Tayama sharply points her finger up at his face, causing Sasaki to flinch backward in complete bewilderment. Tayama chuckles and asks Sasaki what could possibly be so scary about an uncle like him. She adds that she seriously does not understand it, while Sasaki stands beside her looking nervous. Tayama remarks that if she were a child, she would not be scared of him. Sasaki takes a drag from his cigarette and quietly reflects that he does not think he would be afraid of Tayama either. A weather report broadcasts news of a rapid typhoon warning of strong winds and heavy rain. The announcer advises people to remain indoors as the storm in the area is expected to last for 3 hours. Heavy rain and strong winds batter the exterior of the 24-hour supermarket. A completely soaked Sasaki arrives at the supermarket doors, clutching his briefcase. He reads a posted notice stating that the store is closing early at 9 p.m. for the safety of customers and staff, prompting him to remark that the supermarket is vastly different from his own company. Sasaki jolts in surprise as Tayama suddenly bangs on the glass door from the inside. She pushes the sliding doors open slightly and explains that she is waiting for the manager to drive her home, but since the manager is busy, she has a lot of free time. Tayama leans out through the gap in the doors and asks a shivering, soaked Sasaki if he wants to smoke, and he honestly admits that he wants to a lot. Heavy rain continues to pour down outside the glass doors of the supermarket. Sasaki sits inside the store entrance, drying himself with a towel, and thanks Tayama for providing it. Tayama sits across from him, lighting her cigarette, and reassures him it is fine since she just wanted someone to kill time with. Tayama tells Sasaki that he looks very interesting today. Sasaki pauses with the towel and questions her comment, to which she replies that his hair is messy. Tayama stares intently at him and remarks that he looks just as interesting as the time he wore glasses. Sasaki blushes in embarrassment and asks if it is really that funny, and Tayama bluntly confirms that it is. Sasaki privately reflects that he does not understand the humor of young people these days. He reaches into his soaked pocket and pulls out a heavily wrinkled wet object, causing him to react in sudden shock. Sasaki cries out in absolute despair as he realizes his entire pack of cigarettes has been ruined by the rain. Tayama chuckles and sarcastically calls him a role model for company slaves, while Sasaki laments that he only focused on keeping the work documents in his bag dry. Tayama offers her pack to Sasaki, calling it a little help for a poor person. Sasaki tearfully notes how expensive everything is right now, while looking deeply touched, prompting Tayama to hand him a cigarette. Tayama happily offers him another cigarette, but Sasaki frantically declines while lighting the first one. Sasaki lights his cigarette and takes a drag, noting the strong flavor and internally expressing surprise that Tayama likes that specific kind. Sasaki quietly exhales a cloud of smoke. Tayama stares intently at him in silence. They both smoke in complete silence while staring at each other. Tayama loudly asks what is wrong, pointing out that they were just chatting, but now he is completely silent. Sasaki frantically apologizes and admits that facing each other makes him nervous and unsure of what to say. Tayama casually reminds him that they are just sitting in a different spot to avoid the rain. Tayama sighs that he cannot be helped and suggests they pick a topic to discuss, which Sasaki enthusiastically agrees to. Tayama taps her cigarette over her portable ashtray and asks Sasaki what made him start smoking in the first place. Sasaki immediately breaks into a nervous sweat and looks completely caught off guard. Tayama waves her hand and calls his name, while a shocked Sasaki looks away and privately notes that she really picked quite a topic. Sasaki nervously wipes his face with his towel and warns her that his reason for starting is actually very boring. Tayama asks him to tell her that boring reason anyway. Sasaki awkwardly explains that someone offered to let him try it, and then he just could not control himself. Tayama questions his phrasing, asking who let him try it. Sasaki looks completely overshadowed with guilt, while Tayama stares coldly and sharply calls out to him. Sasaki stammers, nervously struggling to find his words. Sasaki covers his mouth in deep embarrassment and clarifies that it was his college girlfriend who forced him to try it. Tayama turns away and bursts into laughter. Tayama continues to laugh into her hand, teasing that being forced into it is exactly like the Sasaki she knows, which prompts him to question if it really is. A deeply flustered Sasaki loudly insists that he was forced to try it. Tayama calmly smiles and notes that he really does prefer this specific cigarette. Sasaki waves his hand dismissively while still blushing, declaring that it is the end of his boring old man story. Tayama sits quietly holding her cigarette and looks forward in thought. Tayama has her own story, explaining that she saw someone smoking and simply followed suit. She mentions that the store used to have an outdoor smoking area 8 years ago where customers would take their smoke breaks. Tayama looks at her cigarette and recalls that she only remembers one specific customer from that time, describing him as a salaryman with very messy hair who would always smoke right after buying something. Tayama explains that back then she wanted to quit her job because she kept making mistakes, but the man asked her whether her pain from wanting to leave or her passion for the job was stronger. Tayama takes a drag from her cigarette and quietly admits that the man enlightened her. Tayama tells Sasaki that the image of that person smoking stayed in her mind until she turned 20, and then she unconsciously started doing it too. Sasaki's eyes widen in sudden realization as he listens to her story. Sasaki quietly calls out Tayama's name as she glances over at him. Sasaki looks directly at Tayama and confidently deduces that she did not start smoking unconsciously, but rather because she actually has feelings for that person. The fluorescent ceiling light above them suddenly sparks and buzzes loudly. Sasaki frantically scratches the back of his neck and apologizes for speaking out of turn, quickly adding that he is sorry if he was wrong or made her uncomfortable. Sasaki stares silently at Tayama through the smoke of his cigarette. Tayama stares back with wide eyes and quietly asks if his assumption is really true. Sasaki tries to reply, but the sliding glass doors behind him suddenly give way, causing him to fall backward with a loud shout. A loud crash echoes as he hits the ground. Sasaki sits back down on his crate and lets out a heavy sigh of exhaustion while Tayama keeps her back turned to him. A hand visibly trembles in the quiet tension. Tayama glances back at Sasaki over her shoulder, her hand shaking as she holds her cigarette. Tayama frantically stammers an apology and asks if he is hurt, but Sasaki quickly insists that he is perfectly fine. Sasaki jolts in panic, covering his face as he deeply apologizes and frantically tells her she can wash up if she finds him disgusting. Tayama calmly states that she should be the one asking if he is all right, prompting a highly flustered Sasaki to loudly shout that he is fine. Tayama softly chuckles and asks if he is really okay. Sasaki recalls her earlier quiet question, asking if his assumption about her feelings was really true. Sasaki frantically yells his agreement and makes a panicked excuse to leave, claiming the rain will stop soon, while Tayama bluntly points out that it is still pouring and tells him to be quiet. Later at his apartment, Sasaki sits alone by his balcony door in a complete daze. Sasaki covers his face in deep embarrassment, privately lamenting that he said way too much today. Sasaki looks at his hand holding his cigarette, reflecting on the strong sense of regret he felt at that time. He recalls Tayama's gentle smile as she explained how the man had enlightened her. Sasaki quietly reflects that Tayama was entirely unaware of how gentle she looked while reminiscing about that memory, noting that feelings toward a person can become a daily driving force. He reaches his hand out, thinking to himself that it would really be a shame to leave those feelings unrealized. Sasaki recalls Yamada smiling warmly at him and realizes that he feels the exact same way, deciding that this is the very reason he wants Tayama to realize her own feelings as well. Sasaki curls up on the floor in intense embarrassment, groaning as he realizes he was just acting like a big shot and meddling in someone else's business. He laments that his worst traits as an older man were on full display. Out on her balcony, Tayama lightly pokes her hand while holding her cigarette, quietly recalling how Sasaki told her that she had feelings for that person. Tayama smiles softly as she repeats his claim about her having feelings for him, amusedly remarking that it was quite a bold statement coming from such a dense blockhead. Tayama gazes out into the starry night sky and feels relieved that she did not tell him the man from her memory actually looked a little bit like him. A kite flies high over an apartment building as the new year is cheerfully welcomed. A coworker playfully asks Garu to recommend a book, only to immediately demand that Garu read it to her instead. Garu ignores the teasing and explains over the phone that she is not returning to her family home this year, opting to just chill at her own place, which her coworker finds nice. Garu asks what her coworker is currently up to. The coworker struggles to hold onto two heavily protesting children, explaining that they are trying to head to the shrine, and Garu casually tells her to watch out for the slippery floors. A sudden notification dings on Garu's phone, catching her attention and briefly pausing their conversation. Garu looks at her phone to see a strange New Year sticker sent by Yamada, noting that she has never seen anyone else use it. Her coworker chimes in over the call, mentioning that Yamada just texted her the exact same sticker. Yamada sits on her bed holding a cigarette and looking at her phone with deep confusion as she receives a new message. Yamada reads a blunt reply from her manager, who tells her to take care of her health while completely criticizing the strange sticker for not being cute. Yamada begins typing a confused response, quietly wondering what the manager means. Yamada puts out her cigarette, privately thinking that the sticker is very cute and resembles Sasaki. Garu calls out to her, telling her to stop making that face and come help them clean, to which Yamada quietly agrees. Yamada washes a bowl in the sink with soap and water. Garu's husband suggests they visit the shrine after eating now that Yamada is back. Yamada groans that she is too lazy and will just think about it, leaving him looking dejected at her response. Garu comforts her sobbing husband by rubbing his back and reminds Yamada that her sisters are not coming back to visit, making him lonely. She suggests Yamada go along and have him treat her to ramen, which finally convinces Yamada to agree. As she continues washing the dishes, Yamada decides to help Sasaki out as well. She smiles as she remembers that he always draws bad fortunes at the shrine, deciding she will pray for him to be a little less unfortunate this year. A hand holds up a fortune slip predicting misfortune, which bluntly states that the person the reader likes is right next to them, but they will never notice anyway. Sasaki stares down at his bad fortune in absolute defeat, while his coworker cheerfully laughs at him for drawing misfortune yet again. The coworker teases that drawing bad fortunes so consistently is a talent, which Sasaki grumbles does not make him happy at all. When the coworker playfully offers to trade his own great fortune slip, Sasaki frantically rejects the idea, insisting they cannot do that. Sasaki sighs that he is used to the bad luck and excuses himself to go smoke. His coworker teasingly warns him not to trip on the slippery floor, prompting an annoyed Sasaki to snap back that he will not as he carefully walks away. Sasaki stands at an outdoor ashtray and ashes his cigarette, letting out a relieved breath. Standing alone in the designated smoking area, Sasaki smokes and privately wonders if it is strange to draw a bad fortune every single year, questioning if he needs to hire an exorcist. Sasaki takes a drag from his cigarette and thinks back, remembering that he also received a misfortune slip the previous year. Sasaki warmly recalls Yamada's bright smile at the supermarket, reflecting that she gave him strength despite his bad luck. Sasaki then pictures Tayama smoking quietly with her back turned to him. Sasaki looks out at the bustling crowd at the shrine while finishing his cigarette, concluding that it was a very nice year and that meeting those people was definitely a great fortune all on its own. The scene shifts back in time 23 years to the winter season outside a lively restaurant. Inside the lively restaurant, a young Sasaki rushes through the sliding door and apologizes for being late. His friends loudly call him out on his tardiness, while teasing another friend named Suzuki about his company recently going out of business, prompting a crying Suzuki to tell them to stop bringing it up. A friend tells the group to cheer up since many people are jobless these days, before pointing out to Sasaki that Tuno is also attending the dinner today. Sasaki silently glances over at Tuno as she smokes. His friends quietly gossip about how all the female colleagues love her, and how she became even more distant after graduation, lamenting that they have absolutely no chance to approach her. As the group continues eating and chatting together, Sasaki quietly takes a drink and privately wonders to himself if Tuno has already quit smoking. Tuno suddenly turns her head. Sasaki jolts in surprise. A waitress suddenly slips and spills a full glass of water directly onto Sasaki, completely shocking everyone at the table. The waitress frantically screams out her apologies as the rest of the group scrambles to call for towels to clean up the mess. Sasaki stands alone outside in the cold, wiping his soaked pants with a towel and hoping they dry before his interview the next day. As he dries off, he quietly reflects on the fact that his and Tuno's eyes had met right before the spill happened. Sasaki nervously sips his drink as he discreetly watches Tuno mingling with the other guests across the room. Sasaki steps outside and leans against the railing, nervously laughing as he worries that Tuno must be disgusted by him staring at her so much since they only talked occasionally during their seminar. Suddenly, the door violently swings open behind him. Sasaki cries out in pain as the door hits him and he accidentally touches something hot, while a voice suddenly speaks up from behind him. Tuno recognizes him and apologizes for hitting him with the door, clumsily asking if his brain is all right before correcting herself to ask about his head. Sasaki frantically apologizes and completely takes the blame for standing right in front of the door. Tuno sympathizes with him getting spilled on by beer, which Sasaki downplays as something he is used to. When Sasaki asks why she is outside, she explains that she ran away because dealing with the younger students trying to talk to her was a pain. Tuno stands quietly with her arms crossed. Tuno pulls out a pack of cigarettes and taps it against her hand, which catches Sasaki completely by surprise. Tuno lights a cigarette as Sasaki mentions he thought she had quit smoking. She casually explains that she simply dislikes smoking in front of a crowd. Sasaki smiles and privately reflects that she has not changed at all. Tuno then calls his name, mentioning that she has been thinking about something ever since they did a class together, making him nervous. Tuno bluntly asks Sasaki if he has a crush on her, causing him to scream out in absolute shock and terror. Tuno teases him for his rude reaction, and he frantically apologizes, claiming he makes that noise whenever he gets scared. When a heavily flustered Sasaki asks how she knew about his crush, she casually notes that she will tell him since it is an interesting topic. Tuno explains that he always hangs around the smoking area without actually smoking, just to stare at her, and always quickly looks away whenever she catches him. She adds that his behavior made it obvious, apologizing if she was just overthinking things. Sasaki lowers his head, trembling and sweating profusely in complete silence, which prompts a surprised Tuno to call out his name. A heavily blushing Sasaki admits he had no idea he was staring at her so much and asks if he is an idiot. Tuno looks away and bluntly calls him a dense idiot, which he meekly agrees with. Sasaki covers his mouth to hide his intense embarrassment and apologizes, asking if she can answer one question for him. Tuno quietly prompts him to ask. Sasaki asks Tuno if him liking her just as things are will be a bother to her. Tuno stifles a laugh, and a blushing Sasaki promises that he will just keep his feelings in his heart and stop staring at her, noting that since she graduated, he will not see her often outside of occasions like this anyway. Tuno bursts into loud laughter and calls Sasaki really weird, pointing out that he should be asking her to go out with him in this kind of situation. Sasaki looks completely shocked and asks if that is how it works before quickly agreeing to do so. Tuno smiles warmly as she takes a drag from her cigarette and confesses that his weirdness is exactly what she likes about him. A completely stunned and blushing Sasaki puts a cigarette in his mouth and takes a deep inhale. Sasaki immediately breaks into a violent coughing fit. Tuno casually asks him how his first time smoking feels and wonders if her confession was a bit too sudden, while a choking Sasaki asks if she is drunk. Sasaki complains that the smoke is incredibly bitter and admits he feels dizzy, stammering her name as she approaches him. Tuno leans down close over Sasaki and tells him that if they smoke together, he can take a much closer look at her. Sasaki stares up at her, heavily sweating and blushing with wide eyes. Tuno smiles and walks away, telling Sasaki he can keep the cigarette and do whatever he wants with it. When a flustered Sasaki asks what she means by whatever he wants, she playfully tells him to check the dictionary since he is in the literature club. Sasaki quietly looks at the cigarette in his hand before putting it away. The scene transitions back to the present day, where Sasaki stands outside the supermarket and decides to head inside to buy a new pack. A startled Sasaki lies in a hospital bed as Tayama, dressed as a nurse, suddenly appears and announces that it is time, despite his protests that he just ate dinner. Tayama bluntly informs him that it is time for the toilet, holding up a urinal bottle and noting that he has not used it yet. Sasaki frantically tries to escape through the window, insisting he can go by himself, while Tayama firmly pulls him back and asks if he is disobeying hospital orders. Nearby, an excited manager, Goth, shouts that this is her dream scenario, while another coworker looks on in jealousy. A group of people clink their glasses together in a cheerful toast inside a public bar. Manager Goth enthusiastically announces the start of their promised year-end staff party. Yamada aggressively chugs her drink while Ono quietly complains about the situation being a pain. Goth tells Misawa that she already knows how to be a service director this year, so it should be easy. Misawa cheerfully holds up a peace sign and confidently declares that she can take care of anyone who makes a mistake. Goth enthusiastically agrees as someone praises Director Misawa for being a good teacher, while Misawa casually points out that her glass is empty. Tayama stands alone in the cold and lights her cigarette. As she exhales the smoke, she quietly recalls Sasaki telling her that she did not start smoking unconsciously. Tayama recalls Sasaki suggesting she started smoking because she actually has feelings for that person. At the year-end staff party, a coworker points out that Yamada seems to be enjoying smoking a lot lately. Misawa comments to the others that Yamada has been all about eating, drinking, and smoking lately, while another coworker notes how attractive Yamada looks when she smokes, and Yamada admits she has been enjoying it recently. Yamada tells her coworkers that she enjoys smoking because of one of her fans prompting them to realize she is talking about Sasaki, the docile-looking office worker. A coworker praises Sasaki as a polite customer who always expresses his gratitude, while Misawa excitedly recalls that he is Yamada's number 28 fan. Misawa notes that very few customers get Yamada's nod of approval. Misawa praises Sasaki as a great married guy, which leaves her coworkers thoroughly confused. The coworkers mishear Misawa's comment as either Quarterly Magazine or Locomotive, questioning what she actually meant. Yamada freezes in shock at the mention of Sasaki being married, then grabs Misawa in a panic to demand if she has any actual evidence for her claim. Misawa explains that she saw Sasaki at her register with a lady and Sasaki paid for her purchase while wearing a ring on his finger. Misawa recalls the lady mentioning that it has been 10 years since Sasaki got married. Sasaki's companion asks if he still remembers that, to which he agrees, prompting a startled Misawa to loudly ask him if he is really married. Back at the party, Misawa laughs heartily and assumes Sasaki's wife must be a beautiful woman who blesses his life. Yamada stands up silently, prompting Ono to try and calm Misawa down while checking if Yamada is all right. And angry, Yamada coldly states that Sasaki's personal life does not concern her at all, muttering that it is normal for someone his age to be married once or twice. Ono silently watches Yamada while Misawa eats happily, letting out a sigh of relief that Yamada's outburst has passed. Later that night, as a dog barks in the distance, Yamada privately wonders if Sasaki is actually just a divorced man. The next morning, the sun rises over the 24-hour supermarket. Yamada works at the cash register with her usual bright smile, welcoming a customer. Ono watches from a distance and notes how glad she is that Yamada looks normal today despite her bad mood at the bar, but Misawa remains skeptical. Misawa narrows her eyes and remarks that Yamada always appears much more energetic when she is actually really upset. Yamada continuously scans items while internally grumbling that she does not care whether Sasaki is married or not, trying to convince herself his personal life is none of her business. Yamada imagines Misawa laughing and teasing that Sasaki must be having fun smoking with a girl behind the supermarket despite having a beautiful wife at home. Yamada twitches in frustration as she continues scanning. Sasaki suddenly approaches the register carrying a shopping basket and politely greets her. Ono quickly covers Misawa's mouth to prevent her from blurting out a greeting, while Yamada stares ahead with a completely flat, silent expression. Yamada flashes a professional smile and asks if Sasaki has a point card, but she secretly stares down at his empty hands as he reaches for his wallet. Yamada unexpectedly blurts out that Sasaki does not seem to wear it all the time since it is not on his left hand today, leaving Sasaki completely startled and confused about what she means by his hand. Sasaki looks down at his hand and suddenly realizes what she is referring to. A blushing Sasaki laughs and explains that he does not want to lose or break it, so he avoids wearing it outside even though his colleagues tell him he should carry such a dear item with him at all times. A sudden smack echoes as Yamada reacts in frustration to Sasaki's words. Sasaki happily tells Yamada that his family often nags him about using his point card before it expires, and Yamada lets out a quiet, sarcastic chuckle. Yamada maintains her bright professional smile as she thanks Sasaki for visiting, while Sasaki walks away feeling pleased. As Sasaki walks away happily thinking about chatting with Yamada again, Yamada quietly reflects that Sasaki never lied about his personal life, but simply never mentioned it because she had never asked. Yamada stands alone at her register, fiercely trying to convince herself that she does not care about Sasaki's personal life at all. The scene shifts to a few days later under the streetlights outside the supermarket at night. Sasaki walks toward the smoking area, lamenting that he has been too busy to visit lately and hoping Tayama is staying warm since she usually wears light clothing. Sasaki stands by the fence and smokes, sweating in intense embarrassment, as he recalls how he meddled in Tayama's personal business during their last conversation. Sasaki worries that his nosiness might have ruined his relationship with Tayama, but his thoughts are interrupted when he suddenly spots her nearby. Sasaki jolts in surprise and nervously greets Tayama, causing her to jolt backward. Tayama immediately turns around to walk away, leaving a shocked Sasaki to panic, as he realizes she is indeed avoiding him because of his previous meddling. A desperate Sasaki runs after her, calling out her name. Sasaki rushes through the doorway and calls out to Tayama, declaring that he wants to apologize to her. Tayama stops and quietly asks if he really wants to apologize to her, and a downcast Sasaki confirms that he does. Sasaki calls out in surprise, as Tayama suddenly turns behind the smoking partition, leaving him startled. Sasaki leans around the partition as Tayama smokes, nervously telling her that he is always worried about making her uncomfortable, while she remarks that his constant guilt is exactly why he is apologizing. Tayama tells Sasaki that he does not need to apologize, leaving him completely stunned and shocked. Tayama continues that saying sorry would make Sasaki a bad person, before bluntly telling him to go home and not stay there. Tayama quietly notes that his wife is waiting for him at home anyway, while a completely bewildered Sasaki watches her in silence. Sasaki raises a finger and calmly explains that he is actually single. A cold wind blows between them as they both stand in complete stunned silence. Tayama looks up in confusion and asks if he was not wearing a ring and shopping with a lady, leaving Sasaki absolutely dumbfounded by her questions. Sasaki realizes the misunderstanding and explains that the ring actually belongs to his little sister and her husband. Sasaki laughs and explains that his sister was just visiting and put her old ring on him because she got a new one, adding that the only precious thing he carries all the time is a watch he received from a senior colleague. A heavily blushing Tayama looks down at her cigarette in absolute embarrassment, privately reflecting on how foolishly she has been acting. Sasaki suddenly lets out a quiet snicker as he watches her. Tayama turns back to glare at him with wide, startled eyes as he bursts into loud laughter. Sasaki continues to laugh heartily and teasingly asks Tayama if she was actually avoiding him, because she was worried about both him and his non-existent wife, warmly thanking her for her concern. An intensely embarrassed Tayama immediately turns around and quickly walks away, ignoring a highly flustered Sasaki as he frantically calls after her to wait. Tayama suddenly spins around, grabs Sasaki by his lapel, and fiercely tells him to shut up and come smoke with her. Misawa screams in excitement after learning that Sasaki is actually single. Misawa is completely shocked to find out that she was wrong about Sasaki being married. Misawa jokingly complains that Sasaki is a confusing uncle, while Ono warns her not to spread false rumors about customers, and Yamada grumbles that she should be the one complaining. Misawa apologizes to Yamada, who coldly reiterates that she does not care because a customer's personal life is none of her business, though Ono remains highly skeptical. Misawa teases Yamada by bringing up how she secretly smokes with Sasaki behind the supermarket under the alias Tayama, leaving Ono to frantically assure Yamada that she did not leak the secret. Misawa reassures them that she has not told anyone else and laughs about how much fun this is, leaving a completely defeated Yamada sitting in stunned silence as she realizes she has been exposed. Yamada eagerly leans in close to Ono to happily reiterate that Sasaki is indeed single. Ono calmly acknowledges the news while Yamada happily chews her food. While Ono internally wonders how to react since nobody else cares about this, Yamada thoughtfully mentions that she believes Sasaki is from the Mai prefecture. Misawa suddenly bursts into the room with a bento and loudly declares that Mai is famous for its unique dialects. When Ono asks if Mai really has dialects, Misawa enthusiastically confirms it and mentions she has housewife friends from there. Ono notes that people from Mai sometimes speak in a very cute dialect, and Misawa agrees that it sounds a bit like the Kansai dialect. Yamada thoughtfully processes this information as Misawa and Ono observe her reaction. Yamada flashes a bright, happy smile and quietly says she understands. Tayama welcomes Sasaki back by congratulating him on his work and demanding to hear his my dialect. Sasaki thanks her but stammers in confusion, asking her to repeat what she said, because she spoke too quickly. Tayama reminds him that he previously mentioned his little sister coming from their old house in Mai, and Sasaki confirms that is correct. Tayama eagerly insists on hearing the dialect, finding the idea of it cute, while a flustered Sasaki notes she is talking very fast and reflects that he has never considered his hometown dialect cute. Sasaki asks Tayama not to laugh at him, and she casually promises that she will not. Sasaki hesitates and clears his throat as he prepares to speak in his dialect, while Tayama watches him closely. Sasaki sheepishly explains that it is hard to speak the dialect on command and adds that it is a little embarrassing ending his sentence with a dialect word. Tayama silently registers the dialect word with wide, stunned eyes. Sasaki apologizes if his weak accent was disappointing, explaining that his sister has a much deeper accent as a local, whereas he has mostly lost his dialect over the years. Tayama suddenly bursts into muffled giggles, prompting an embarrassed Sasaki to demand to know what she is laughing at. Tayama insists she is not laughing, but Sasaki points out that he can clearly hear her snickering right next to him. Tayama lowers her hood, blushing, and reassures him that she is not teasing him, quietly repeating his dialect word and calling it cute. Sasaki frantically argues that she cannot just add the dialect word to random sentences, while Tayama continues to tease him. Meanwhile, someone groans in the background near the ashtray. Sasaki sneezes loudly, making Tayama ask if he is catching a cold, though Sasaki explains that he simply sneezes a lot when the weather gets chilly. Tayama notes that Sasaki has been running around all day for his job, adding that smoking late at night in a freezing place is not helping. Tayama asks why Sasaki has been smoking in the morning lately, and Sasaki mentions there is another reason for his morning habits. Sasaki explains that he usually smokes before 6 in the morning, which Tayama points out must feel incredibly cold. Sasaki describes the absolute quiet of winter mornings, expressing how much he loves the quietness and the crackling sound of his cigarette before going back to bed when everyone else is waking up. Tayama looks forward, quietly reflecting that winter mornings must feel a little lonely. Tayama suggests that she should try waking up early to smoke in the morning too, which Sasaki happily supports. Sasaki suddenly remembers Tayama's late work shift and asks if she will realistically be able to wake up that early, which she firmly insists she can. Tayama shows Sasaki the early alarm set on her phone, telling him that she will definitely wake up and that he needs to be awake too. Early the next morning, Tayama's phone alarm buzzes loudly, prompting her to get out of bed and grab her cigarettes. A tired, shivering Tayama stumbles out of her room, groaning about how cold it is. Tayama steps outside onto her apartment balcony in her sandals. Tayama sits on a small stool on her balcony and lights her cigarette in the dim morning light. Tayama takes a long drag from her cigarette and exhales a stream of smoke into the cold air. Tayama gazes out from her balcony into the quiet, empty morning sky. Tayama continues to smoke on her balcony, admitting to herself that the quiet morning is indeed nice. A loud, persistent alarm beep echoes from one of the apartments in the building. Sasaki remains sound asleep like a log, despite his alarm ringing at 5:30, having worked without a holiday for a very long time. The city streets are lively and filled with Christmas decorations and couples walking together. Sasaki walks tiredly through the crowded train station, noticing how festive the city has become. Sasaki is startled by the Christmas lights, realizing he has been so busy working and traveling for his job at the end of the year that he has completely fallen behind the times. Sasaki reflects that unlike his friends, he has absolutely nothing to do on Christmas and wonders if the supermarket registers will be crowded that night. A single mandarin orange rolls across the pavement and stops near Sasaki's shoe. Sasaki stops and looks down in surprise at the rolling orange. Sasaki picks up the mandarin orange and wonders who dropped it, only to be startled by loud barking and screaming nearby. Sasaki turns to see the supermarket employee, Obata, frantically crying and begging Daigoro the dog to leave him alone after the dog knocked over boxes of oranges. Obata wails in despair about having to work overtime during the holidays while everyone else is home having fun, which deeply resonates with a sympathetic Sasaki. Sasaki watches the young man cry before stepping in to help him pick up the scattered oranges while the worker continues to loudly lament his mistakes. Obata jolts in surprise as a voice calls out to him. Sasaki calmly asks Obata if he just needs the mandarins put back into the box. Obata apologizes as the box is finally filled back up. Obata bows deeply on the ground to apologize for wasting Sasaki's time and dirtying his jacket, but Sasaki warmly reassures him, thanking him for his hard work during the busy winter season. Obata looks up, deeply touched by Sasaki's kindness. Sasaki bids him farewell and prepares to leave, but Obata suddenly stops him in a panic. Obata frantically asks if Sasaki is not going to smoke today, causing a bewildered Sasaki to stammer in shock. When a panicked Sasaki asks how he knows, Obata explains that he also smokes and has occasionally seen Sasaki hanging out behind the store with Tayama. Obata explains that he has been avoiding the area because he cannot handle crowds or tight places, leaving Sasaki mildly surprised. Obata asks if Sasaki is a clerk who sells some sort of seasoning at the store, before nervously adding that he thinks smoking there is fine and apologizing. The two sit down on crates next to each other and smoke together in silence. Sasaki privately reflects that the atmosphere is incredibly awkward, comparing it to the time he smoked with the manager. Sasaki internally panics and apologizes to Tayama, wondering why he went along with Obata's misunderstanding about his job. Obata quietly asks for his name, and Sasaki hesitatingly introduces himself as Sasaki. Obata nervously introduces himself as Obata from the produce department, while Sasaki is left thoroughly bewildered by the awkward interaction. Sasaki is impressed to learn that Obata is a manager despite his young age. Obata humbly downplays his promotion while Sasaki asks him why the mandarins are kept out here in the back. Obata explains that they buy whole boxes to sell them cheaper, manually cleaning and bagging each mandarin, prompting Sasaki to praise his dedication to quality and price. Obata waves his hands, frantically explaining that he does not pay a lot of attention, but simply feels the need to compensate, which confuses Sasaki. Obata explains that he is tall and stands out but fears people and gets customer complaints, so he feels he must compensate by working hard based on advice from someone he highly respects. Obata quietly resolves to do his best to improve the store's reputation so the person he respects will feel his efforts are worthwhile. Sasaki privately wonders why he is acting so stylish, before patting Obata on the shoulder to get his attention. Sasaki smiles and reassures Obata that he can definitely succeed. Sasaki adds that the person Obata respects will surely be happy to see him trying his absolute best, causing Obata to burst into loud, emotional tears that run down onto his cigarette. Obata vigorously wipes his tears away and suddenly stands up with renewed energy, startling Sasaki. Obata lifts a stack of boxes and thanks Sasaki for talking to him, promising to try harder as Sasaki bids him farewell and encourages him to do his best. Obata loudly shouts after him, asking Sasaki to smoke with him again next time. Sasaki watches the door close and feels deeply touched, reflecting that despite his social anxieties, Obata is a genuinely good young man. Sasaki smiles and reflects on how much he respects young people who take their jobs seriously, suddenly remembering another coworker. A close-up shows a store employee's hands tightly clenching into fists. Sasaki wonders where a relocated supermarket went, only to turn around and spot Yamada standing silently behind him. Yamada creeps up and asks Sasaki if he thinks Obata is cute. Yamada suddenly flashes a bright smile and welcomes him, causing a startled Sasaki to stammer her name. Yamada observes that Sasaki and Obata are pretty close, while a panicked Sasaki quickly puts out his cigarette, stands up, and apologizes for the inconvenience. Yamada mockingly suggests that since Sasaki is so kind, he will probably become close friends with every smoker at the store and smoke with someone other than Tayama. Sasaki looks directly at Yamada and firmly states that he only wants to smoke with Tayama. Sasaki seriously explains that he remembers Tayama was the one who invited him to the smoking area, and he believes an old man like him would not have the right to be there without her. Yamada asks if it really has to be Tayama, as Sasaki looks at her in earnest. Yamada asks if he really would not smoke with the manager or Obata instead, and a clenching fist shows her reaction as Sasaki firmly confirms his choice. Yamada clasps her hands together with a sweet, radiant smile and says she thinks his dedication is very nice. Sasaki is completely overwhelmed and flushed with embarrassment. Yamada points out that Sasaki is sweating profusely, while a heavily blushing Sasaki frantically denies it as he stumbles away in a complete daze. Sasaki nervously blames his sweating on male menopause, while Yamada looks at him with a mixture of exasperation and fondness, privately listing all of his clumsy traits. The next day, a manager thanks the staff over the PA system for their hard work during Christmas. Manager Ono holds a meeting with the staff, reviewing the sales data from different departments and preparing to a special highlight. Ono announces that Obata's produce department brought in the highest sales out of every store, and a shocked Obata politely thanks her. Ono praises Obata for doing his best with the things he can do, but reminds him not to work too much overtime, which he meekly accepts. After the meeting, Yamada calls out to Obata, causing him to jolt in surprise. Yamada asks Obata if he was smoking with Sasaki the day before, and Obata nervously explains that Sasaki helped him pick up some scattered mandarins. Yamada asks if Sasaki is an interesting person, and Obata warmly agrees that Sasaki is both nice and interesting. Yamada wears a smug, proud expression, leaving a confused Obata wondering what she is trying to imply. Yamada notices Ono and Misawa peeking at them from behind the door, while Misawa suggests they just walk in naturally. Misawa happily teases Ono as they walk down the corridor together. Ono brings her electronic cigarette to her mouth. Obata looks through the door window at Yamada, quietly saying her name. Obata recalls asking Yamada what she usually talks about with Sasaki, and her replying that she basically just messes with him, leaving Obata in awe of her. On December 15th, Ono stands thoughtfully inside the supermarket. Some Christmas hats and headbands lie on the table as Ono notes that it is almost Christmas. Ono firmly declares to Yamada that she has no intention of wearing the Christmas accessories. Yamada complains that Ono enjoys bossing her staff around, but Ono clarifies that the festive accessories are meant to spread holiday cheer, though Yamada sighs that they conflict with her personal style. When Yamada challenges her to wear the accessories herself, Ono willingly obliges and puts on the Santa hat and fake mustache. Yamada immediately snaps a photo of Ono on her phone, then offers to wear the accessories if other people find Ono's funny look appealing. Obata sits quietly wearing his work cap. Ono calls out to Obata, who turns around in a flustered panic while holding his cigarette. Ono and Yamada greet him, and an incredibly confused Obata questions Ono's bizarre outfit, prompting her to ask him for his honest opinion on how she looks. Obata stammers in extreme embarrassment, completely caught off guard by her question. Ono stares at him, expectantly waiting for his response. Obata continues to sweat and struggle for words under her intense gaze. Ono places the reindeer headband on a silent Yamada and notes that it looks very nice on her, while internally regretting asking Obata for his opinion. Ono places a Santa hat on Obata's head, as well, telling him he can join in on the fun, while Yamada quietly smokes with her antlers on. As a panicked Obata questions why everyone is dressed up, Misawa suddenly bursts in, pointing and laughing hysterically at how mismatched they all look. Ono dryly points out the contradiction in Misawa's comments, leaving Misawa confused while the others stare at her in silent annoyance. Yamada sighs that the outfits really do not suit them, while Ono tells Misawa to go back to work as they all head back inside. Later that day, Sasaki smokes and reflects on his visit to the store, noting that the Christmas decorations looked nice. Tayama explains that their manager is simply addicted to decorating, before playfully teasing Sasaki about wanting to see Yamada in reindeer ears, causing him to choke and blush in embarrassment. A highly flustered Sasaki stammers in shock at Tayama's sudden tease, while Tayama casually dismisses it, silently reflecting that Sasaki would probably die of shock if he actually saw Yamada dressed like that. The scene transitions to cash register number 2 inside the supermarket. Yamada stands at the cash register and welcomes customers with a warm, professional smile. Sasaki places his shopping basket on the counter, and Yamada begins processing his items. Yamada scans Sasaki's items one by one while Sasaki silently observes her. Yamada politely announces the total amount, and Sasaki prepares to pay. Yamada hands him his change, and a cheerful Sasaki thanks her. Yamada carefully places the cash and coin change into Sasaki's hand. Sasaki hesitates, but politely asks Yamada about something he noticed, drawing her attention to her right sleeve. Yamada nervously chuckles and explains that her right sleeve is simply a bit too long. Sasaki understands and apologizes for bringing it up, while Yamada reassures him it is fine and thanks him for his visit as he departs. Sasaki walks away from the supermarket and heads home under the night sky. Back at his apartment, Sasaki takes a hot shower to wash away the fatigue of the day. Back in his apartment, Sasaki lies on his bed and smokes while staring at the ceiling in deep thought. As he lies in bed, Sasaki recalls his interaction with Yamada at the register and resolves to do his best at work the following day as well. A close-up shows a hand holding a lit cigarette while the other hand displays a bruised red mark on the palm. Yamada quietly sits and smokes, thinking to herself that it was a close call and worrying that things would get complicated if Sasaki noticed her bruised hand while they smoked together. Yamada reflects that she does not want Sasaki to worry about her, especially since the story behind her injury is quite embarrassing, mockingly imagining how his dense mind would jump to conclusions. Ono opens the back door to check on Yamada's hand, and Yamada thanks her for the work and the ice, reassuring her that her injury has already healed. Ono gently warns her to be careful and notes that punching a locker over an annoying customer can really cause harm, while Yamada dismisses it with a laugh as a simple accident. Ono has a stress relief technique about hitting a garbage bag when throwing it out, which Yamada finds quite appealing. Yamada welcomes a customer to the register with a bright smile. Tayama casually asks a young clerk if he has a crush on Yamada, causing the clerk to panic in embarrassment, while an older female coworker laughs in amusement. Garu laughs and points out that things look much funnier on their side, while a flustered Obata and an observant coworker look on. Sasaki calls out to Tayama behind the supermarket during the New Year holiday. Tayama greets him and wishes him a happy New Year, and as Sasaki mentions his holiday ends today and expresses concern about returning to work, Tayama jokingly remarks that he looks like he is going to die tomorrow. Tayama invites Sasaki to smoke behind the supermarket with her, and he gladly agrees. Tayama quietly notes that she is glad Sasaki is smoking with her this year as well. A heavily blushing Sasaki is deeply touched by her words but suddenly panics as he realizes she must have overheard his earlier conversation about her. Sasaki turns only to find that Tayama has already walked away without listening to his reply. Sasaki catches up to her, and after Tayama prompts him to keep moving, he observes that she seems to have fully recovered from her cold, which she confirms. Tayama asks if he was worried about her, and Sasaki honestly admits that he was so worried he could not think of anything else, but is glad to see her now. Sasaki expresses his relief that she is finally dressed in warm layers for the cold weather. Tayama stops walking and asks him if he genuinely thinks she is always lightly dressed. A startled Sasaki quickly explains that he just thought it would be safer for her to wear warmer clothes. Tayama dismisses the topic and suggests they sit down, and they both settle onto the crates. Tayama suddenly leans in close and teases him by calling him an old man, to which a sweating Sasaki frantically agrees. Tayama lectures Sasaki that fashion pays no regard to the weather, but is about wearing clothes that provide energy, arguing that it is a resolute form of entertainment just like smoking. Tayama suddenly does a banzai pose and tells Sasaki to do the same, leaving a highly confused Sasaki to raise his hands as well. Tayama suddenly lunges forward and slides some disposable hand warmers into Sasaki's jacket pockets, leaving him completely red-faced and yelling in shock. Tayama sits back down and casually remarks that she is slightly more resistant to the cold than he is, which a deeply flustered Sasaki sheepishly concedes. As they sit together smoking, Sasaki privately wonders how she knew he carried hand warmers while reflecting on his own boring approach to dressing for the weather. Sasaki recalls that Yamada must have noticed the hand warmers when she scanned them for him at the register earlier. Heavy rain begins to pour down outside a building. Having forgotten his umbrella, Sasaki begs his colleague Suzuki to his umbrella and walk him to the station, but Suzuki looks highly annoyed by the request. A grumbling Suzuki reluctantly lends Sasaki a small, cute umbrella covered in cartoon patterns that his daughter gave him as a birthday gift, sternly warning him to dry it before returning it. Yamada is carrying out the trash when she notices a can thrown incorrectly into the food packaging recycle bin and grumbles about whoever is responsible. Yamada walks out to the alleyway and notices it is raining heavily, spotting someone standing nearby. Yamada prepares to run through the downpour to throw away the garbage, but stops as a patterned umbrella is opened over her. Yamada bumps into Sasaki, who is holding his colleague's cute umbrella over her, and she politely apologizes to her guest. Sasaki blushingly reflects that he should be the one apologizing since his umbrella is so small. Yamada laughs quietly to herself. Yamada continues to stifle a laugh. Yamada desperately tries not to laugh while Sasaki asks if she is okay, but a nearby child points and loudly laughs at how ridiculously small the cute umbrella looks on Sasaki. Yamada completely bursts into laughter while a deeply embarrassed Sasaki nervously laughs it off, noting that children are incredibly honest. Sasaki asks Yamada if she is taking the trash out, and she nervously confirms that she was just planning to run quickly through the rain. Sasaki looks at her and unexpectedly invites her to stand under the umbrella with him, leaving her completely stunned. Sasaki apologizes that he cannot simply give her the umbrella because it belongs to someone else, but worries that she will catch a cold. Yamada thanks him as they walk together under the umbrella while Sasaki offers to carry one of her trash bags, assuring her that his own shopping can wait. As they walk together, Yamada quietly observes that Sasaki seems completely oblivious to the intimacy of sharing an umbrella with her. Yamada reflects on how mentioning the D umbrella might embarrass Sasaki too much, deciding it is better to save it as a perfect way to tease him during their next meeting. When Yamada remarks that the umbrella is very cute, Sasaki explains that his coworker received it as a heartfelt gift from his kind daughter, adding that his coworker must be a very good person to be able to use it. Yamada playfully remarks that it must be an umbrella meant for nice people, and Sasaki laughs and agrees. A profile page outlines Goddess' career path, showing her progression from a cashier manager to the flagship store's planning board. Gadu instructs her staff to finish their monthly reports on time and be clear about their sales goals. Obata quietly reflects on how much he respects Gadu while his coworkers look on. The staff discuss how Gadu has never made a single mistake or missed a day of work, jokingly calling her a monster. Having completed his report ahead of schedule, Obata rushes over to present it to Gadu first. Obata starts to present his report to Gadu, but suddenly stops when he hears her sniffing. Obata drops his clipboard in shock as he witnesses Gadu sobbing quietly in her office. Gadu suddenly turns her head to look back. Gadu opens her office door and peers into the empty hallway, wondering if she was just imagining things. Yamada smiles, looking forward to eating her instant ramen when a frantic Obata suddenly runs up to her. Yamada asks Obata if there is a problem or a customer complaint at the front desk, but a panicked Obata desperately tells her it is not that. Obata struggles to find his words as he begins to bring up the manager. Obata hesitates to reveal the manager's crying state, privately worrying that if he tells Yamada, her sadness will spread and deeply affect the entire store's tightly knit staff. Yamada bluntly asks Obata what is wrong with the manager, but Obata quickly panics and denies that anything is wrong. Obata tells Yamada it is nothing, but as he leaves the room, he mysteriously thanks her for everything she has done so far, leaving Yamada to wonder if he is about to die today. Obata resolves to make his move and approaches the smoking area behind the supermarket. Obata sits outside, determined to help relieve the manager's sadness, reviewing a notepad filled with natural conversation starters while internally praying for Sasaki to give him strength. Gadu opens the back door, thanking Obata for his hard work, and a startled Obata quickly greets her. Gadu sits down to smoke, sighing that she has been exhausted lately, and Obata asks her if there is anything currently bothering her. Gadu asks why he is asking, and Obata tries to act natural, explaining that his coworkers always pay close attention to her just as she does to them. Gadu feels deeply touched to have such a caring employee, while Obata internally celebrates for successfully handling the conversation naturally. Gadu quietly repeats the word natural to herself in confusion. Gadu thanks Obata again and prepares to head back inside while Sasaki unexpectedly falls over nearby, leaving a sweating Obata completely shocked. Obata nervously makes an excuse about a chair not being stable, but Gadu ignores the distraction and tells him she has something to ask. Gadu pulls out Obata's completed monthly report and asks if it is indeed finished. Gadu explains that Obata dropped his report outside her office and asks if he was the one who called her name earlier, leaving a cornered Obata in an absolute panic. Incapable of maintaining his natural disguise, Obata frantically bluffs and shouts his apology for seeing her cry. Gadu calmly accepts his explanation with a simple nod, leaving a sweating Obata utterly stunned by her reaction. Gadu tells Obata to grab a cigarette and listen to her, leaving him slightly confused. Gadu laughs and confesses that she was actually just crying while reading a manga during her break, causing a deeply embarrassed Obata to desperately wish for death. Gadu takes a puff of her cigarette and declares that her rule is not to kill interesting people, while Obata internally expresses his amazement at her ability to enjoy things. Obata apologizes for his misunderstanding, and Garu reassures him that it is fine, adding that she is glad his worries are resolved. Garu adds that she is likewise glad that she did not disappoint her employee. When Garu asks if he was bothered because he thought she was crying over having no one to rely on, Obata is left slightly confused by her interpretation. Garu mentions she had hoped Obata could rely on her whenever there is trouble, while Obata privately wonders what manga was so good that it made her cry and considers reading it himself. Garu suddenly reveals that she originally wanted to become a manga artist, causing Obata to choke on his cigarette smoke and cough violently. Garu explains that she abandoned her dream to become who she is today, prompting a highly intrigued Obata to ask why she gave up on it. Garu admits that she simply could not stand sitting at a desk all day and night, leaving Obata to silently reflect on what a shame that is. Garu asks Obata if he heard from the other staff members about why she still works at the store, and he confirms that he heard her say it is faster to do the work herself. Garu confesses that her main reason is still just her dislike of desk work, adding that her employees tend to exaggerate things way too much. Obata quietly smokes and wonders to himself why the manager is sharing such top-secret information with him. As Garu quietly smokes, she suddenly reacts in confusion, causing Obata to jolt in surprise. Obata frantically asks if she is being serious, while Garu hums quietly in thought. Garu tells Obata that his concern was not unnecessary, but laughs and apologizes when he suddenly trips over a crate in his panic. Garu tells him that if she ever shows any strange behavior again, she hopes she can count on him to let her know. Obata asks if she is truly comfortable sharing all of this with him, and she gently assures him that she is completely fine with it because it is him. A blushing Obata promises to do his best, while privately reflecting on how he is actually starting to look forward to seeing her private moments in the future. Garu hands Obata a list of manga recommendations since he mentioned being interested, while Yamada smugly warns him that the series has a lot of volumes. Yamada asks how the maid cosplay became part of the manager's dream, while Garu listens. Garu explains that she spins a wheel of her favorite cosplay themes to decide on the bonus content for each volume. A local lord furiously demands his yearly tribute and threatens to order seppuku, while Obata and Sasaki bow down to apologize. Sasaki walks away in a gloom, grumbling that his boss constantly orders seppuku over any minor issue, instead of lowering their high yearly tribute, deciding to visit the shop before heading home. Yamada welcomes Sasaki to the shop with a beautiful smile, which Sasaki feels instantly cleanses his soul. Sasaki falls to the ground in shock upon finding a sign stating the shop is closed for the day, lamenting that it is supposed to be open 24 hours when a voice suddenly calls out his name. Tayama approaches and asks how he tripped, teasing that his boss must have yelled at him again, and laughs when Sasaki explains he was ordered to commit seppuku. Tayama jokingly suggests that Sasaki can die peacefully if Yamada acts as his assistant for the seppuku, and a weary Sasaki begins to consider the idea. Sasaki suddenly stops and looks highly alarmed. Sasaki panics at the thought of Yamada having to do something so bloody, but Tayama playfully pokes him in the back. Tayama playfully mimics a slicing motion, sending Sasaki into a state of absolute terror. Sasaki desperately begs for forgiveness as Tayama laughs at his dramatic reaction, bringing the parodied tale to an end. Sasaki asks Suzuki how his conference went, and a frustrated Suzuki grumbles that it was a failure and laments that he forgot his pack of cigarettes. Suzuki begs him to stop talking about the conference and give him a cigarette instead, prompting Sasaki to reach into his pocket and pull out a pack of cigarettes with a surprised look. Sasaki realizes he accidentally left his own pack of cigarettes at home and only has the pack of Beside Me cigarettes that Tayama gave him, while a curious Suzuki asks if it is a new brand. Suzuki thanks him and takes a cigarette from the pack, while Sasaki hesitantly tells him he is welcome. Sasaki suddenly changes his mind and pulls the cigarette pack back, telling Suzuki he cannot give him one after all. Suzuki demands to know why and promises to return one later, but a flustered Sasaki frantically tries to explain that it is not about him. Sasaki cryptically explains that even though the pack belongs to him, it is not just for himself, leaving a completely baffled Suzuki to wonder what on earth he means. Sasaki resolutely decides that he will also not smoke today to make it fair, dragging Suzuki back inside to drink tea instead. The scene transitions to the quiet back alley behind the supermarket under the night sky. Sasaki walks outside deeply regretting his earlier actions as his urge to smoke intensifies. Sasaki notices Tayama and greets her, and she warmly waves back. Sasaki tells her he is about to smoke and asks if she wants to join him. Despite his overwhelming urge to smoke, Sasaki's guilt over Suzuki makes him nervously decline the invitation by claiming he must head home early for work tomorrow, which Tayama finds highly unconvincing. Sasaki confesses that he rejected his coworker's request for a cigarette earlier, so he feels it would be wrong to smoke now, leading Tayama to realize he actually has a pack with him. Sasaki pulls out the Beside Me pack she gifted him, explaining his dilemma. Sasaki admits that he simply did not want to her gift with anyone else and thanks her for the invite, while Tayama bluntly calls him stingy. Tayama teases him further about his stinginess and playfully pushes him away, telling him that it is only right for a stingy person like him not to smoke and that he should go home. Sasaki looks downcast, sadly agreeing that he must indeed be a very stingy person. Tayama quietly agrees with a warm, satisfied smile. Tayama leans in close and teasingly whispers that he is far too stingy. Sasaki walks away with Tayama silently offering a heartfelt apology to Suzuki in his mind. The scene transitions to a restaurant hosting a holiday farewell party for the supermarket's part-time employees. Goth raises a glass and tells the staff to drink as much as they want on her, but jokingly warns the student employees that they will work there for life if they dare take a sip. The staff enjoys a lively dinner where a coworker expresses guilt about being the only ones drinking, while Obata notes that he has to drive the part-timers home afterward anyway. Obata privately reflects on how relieved he is to keep his position and continue working under Goth despite most departments undergoing shift planning. Obata asks Misawa if she is alright, causing her to react in sudden panic, while Ono loudly reassures them that this happens every year during shift planning. Misawa listlessly complains that many part-timers are quitting and taking breaks during the holidays, grumbling that headquarters completely ignored her warnings and prioritized a new store instead. Goth remains optimistic and assures them there is always a way, while Misawa laughs and a coworker silently reflects on how scary Ono can get sometimes. Ono promises to handle the cash register issues herself, while Obata eagerly offers to help as well, and a coworker suddenly asks where Yamada went. Goth explains that Yamada mentioned feeling a bit drunk and stepped outside to cool off and have a cigarette, which catches Obata's attention. Goth silently narrows her eyes, wondering what it means for Yamada to get drunk. Outside the lively restaurant, the cold night air settles over the city. Sasaki supports a heavily drunk Suzuki as they walk away from the bar, while Suzuki loudly insists on continuing the party, and Sasaki scolds him for not choosing a place closer to his home. An angry Suzuki grabs Sasaki by his tie to complain about being scolded, but Sasaki manages to hail a taxi and shoves Suzuki inside, telling him to go home and pay him back the next day. The taxi speeds off into the night. Sasaki lets out a tired sigh of relief now that Suzuki is finally on his way home. As he walks, Sasaki reflects that Suzuki probably cannot vent his frustrations at home in front of his wife and child, noting that people often avoid showing their weak side to those close to them. Sasaki walks back to the supermarket smoking area, thinking that dealing with Suzuki has prepared him for dealing with drunk people, when he notices someone leaning against the wall. Sasaki notes that the supermarket is closed for the holiday and wonders if anyone will actually show up during their break. Suddenly, a hand drops a pack of cigarettes onto a surface with a loud slap. Sasaki is startled by the noise and approaches the figure to ask if she is all right, even offering to call an ambulance, before suddenly realizing who it is. Tayama sits on the ground with a heavily flushed face, smoking a cigarette and playfully pointing at him as she calls him the dense old man Sasaki. A panicked Sasaki asks if she is all right, while a coughing Tayama laughs and casually greets him. When Sasaki asks if she is drunk, Tayama giggles and insists that she rarely gets drunk, claiming she only drinks too much once or twice a year. Sasaki realizes that today must be one of those rare occasions, while an increasingly playful Tayama waves her hands and loudly invites him to smoke with her. Sasaki silently watches Tayama wobble on the ground and decides he cannot leave her alone in her current state, resolving to stay with her until she sobers up. Sasaki compares her state to his friend Suzuki's wild behavior and kindly tells her to take a seat since the cold floor must be chilly. Sasaki frantically apologizes and explains He did not make himself clear, as Tayama prepares to sit down right on his lap. Sasaki scrambles away in a panic to clarify that he meant she should sit on the carton crate instead, and once they both settle down, he quietly wonders if it is really all right for him to see her in such a tired, worn-out state. Suddenly, a soft plapping sound catches Sasaki's attention. Sasaki looks over in shock as a sleepy Tayama leans her head directly onto his shoulder, asking if she can lie down for a bit. Tayama rests her head comfortably on his shoulder and sleepily comments that his legs feel hard, leaving a heavily blushing, panicked Sasaki completely at a loss on how to handle the situation. Sasaki nervously warns her that her body will hurt from sleeping in such an awkward position and suggests she go home to sleep. Tayama sleepily explains that she snuck away from a dinner party because it got too hot and she wanted to smoke outside, and Sasaki asks what kind of party it is. Sasaki explains that they are hosting a farewell party for the part-timers today, and Tayama admits that she snuck out because she genuinely loves everyone at the store, prompting Sasaki to ask if she got drunk simply because she was enjoying herself so much. Tayama explains that she wanted to give her departing co-workers a happy final memory so they can leave with a smile, which deeply moves Sasaki as he looks at her. Tayama sleepily confesses that she snuck out because she does not want things to change and could not bring herself to smile, softly begging Sasaki to keep her vulnerability a secret. Sasaki quietly looks at her and says her name in his thoughts. Sasaki softly tells her that he truly likes how she naturally prioritizes kindness toward others before herself. Sasaki gently reaches out toward her hair, telling her that she does not need to hide her true feelings and selfishness behind her otherwise wonderful personality. Tayama suddenly turns her head to look up at him, catching him completely by surprise as his hand freezes in mid-air. A suspicious Tayama asks if he was trying to give her a head pat, causing a thoroughly embarrassed Sasaki to frantically raise his hand in a panic and bow deeply to apologize. Tayama asks why he wanted to pat her head, and Sasaki shyly explains that since he could not see her face, he thought she might be crying. Tayama chuckles and pats his shoulder, thanking him but reassuring him that she is okay, while a blushing Sasaki apologizes for his unnecessary meddling. Tayama states that she hates crying in front of people, recalling that the last time she actually cried was back when she still worked part-time. Tayama looks down and quietly notes that she now understands the situation. Tayama smiles softly and asks if Sasaki is going to comfort her the next time she cries. A completely flustered and blushing Sasaki struggles to find his words. Sasaki gently replies that he is always willing to listen whenever she has a bad time, though he stammers over how he would comfort her. Tayama blushes and stammers, defensively arguing that it is not necessarily fine for him to touch her just because it was subconscious. Tayama closes her eyes with a gentle smile and quietly trails off. Tayama suddenly slams her hand against the wall behind Sasaki, pinning him and loudly teasing him for acting so classy. Sasaki frantically begs her to calm down, while Tayama demands to know if it is her fault for telling him to stay true to himself. Tayama aggressively asks him to stop confusing his good and bad traits, while a sweating Sasaki remains pinned against the wall. Sasaki starts to apologize as Tayama remains silent. Tayama gently taps her fist against his chest. Tayama quietly calls her gentle tap a personality destruction punch, explaining that anyone hit by it loses their manners, leaving a sweating Sasaki thoroughly confused. Tayama stumbles away, while smoking loudly, telling Sasaki that he should be more impolite and let others worry about him more. Ono and Obata enter the back alley and spot Yamada walking in her drunk, dizzy state. Yamada notices them and asks what is up, while a worried Obata explains that he came to find her because she had not returned. Yamada casually announces she is going home and walks off, leaving a panicked Obata to yell at her for being so carefree while Ono watches. Inside the back alley, a thoroughly exhausted Sasaki sits smoking, quietly apologizing to Goth for his intrusion. The next day, the closed doors of the supermarket are shown as a new day begins. Inside the store, Yamada leans against a metal door, groaning in misery from her hangover. Yamada pulls her hood down in deep embarrassment, repeatedly muttering to herself that she is the absolute worst. Yamada kicks the wall in frustration, dreading the possibility of running into Sasaki, because she only has vague, embarrassing memories of her drunken behavior, including a terrifying thought that she might have revealed her true identity to him. Goth suddenly shouts at Yamada to get back to work, startling her. Yamada begs Garu to warn her if Sasaki shows up so she can hide, but Garu refuses, pointing out that no one would be at the register, and adding that a meeting between them would be highly amusing. At his office, Suzuki hands Sasaki the taxi money from the previous night and asks if he has a hangover, but a completely drained Sasaki replies that he simply learned something new.